The creature's fur bristled, and the eager glint in its eyes was quickly replaced by fear and wariness. It had realized something crucial. This dragon was no ordinary prey. It wasn't weak. It wasn't something to toy with. Hovering in the air, Garen locked his sharp, platinum gaze onto the frost tiger below. His eyes gleamed dangerously. A big cat dares to roar at a true dragon? How amusing. He didn't land. There was no need. Instead, he dropped slightly in altitude, just enough to bring the ferocious frost tiger into range. Opening his maw, Garen released a fireball spell, obscure and tightly focused. At the same time, he extended his claw toward the beast. The gesture wasn't necessary to cast the spell. It merely helped channel his mental focus, ensuring smoother mana flow. Some mages like to shout out spell names for dramatic effect or as a psychological tool. Garen didn't need such theatrics, though he acknowledged the benefit. A small, glowing fireball, barely the size of a pea, formed at the tip of his claw. In the blink of an eye, it vanished, leaving behind only a streak of crimson light in the air as it hurtled toward the frost tiger. Boom! The explosion engulfed a 10-meter radius in flame. But the target was gone. The frost tiger's feline agility was on full display. It had tracked the fireball's path and evaded it with a graceful leap. This was no ordinary beast. It had years of experience fighting magical creatures. It wasn't deceived by the fireball's modest appearance. Its instincts were razor-sharp. While the berserk transformation didn't increase its intelligence, it had enhanced its primal senses to terrifying levels. Garen's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Without a word, he resumed casting. More fireballs appeared, one after another, each one small but deadly. They darted toward the tiger in rapid succession. Dragons, especially one like Garen, were blessed by the elements. His magic reserves far exceeded those of any human spellcaster. Third circle spells like Fireball hardly drained him at all. He could hurl them all day if he wished. Below, the frost tiger twisted and dodged, leaping through the snow with fluid grace. None of the fireballs found their mark. The only result was a blazing field of fire, turning the snow-covered landscape into a glowing inferno. Still, the tiger grew confident. After dodging a particularly dense volley, it bared its fangs and roared back at Garen. Then it crouched, muscles coiling like a spring. With explosive strength, it launched itself high into the air, nearly 100 meters, hurtling toward Garen. The force behind the leap was impressive. It left a spiderweb of cracks in the ice below. Garen remained composed. His platinum eyes calmly watched the incoming beast. With a subtle motion, time energy coiled around his spell and merged with 5 tiny fireballs. He released them. The frost tiger twisted midair, dodging the first 3 with practiced ease. But the 4th fireball, faster, heavier, charged with temporal force, struck it squarely. Bang! Flames erupted in midair. The tiger shrieked, its fur ablaze, and it plummeted. Most creatures in the far north had high resistance to cold. But fire? Fire ravaged them. The wounded beast rolled in the snow, eventually extinguishing the flames. A charred wound marred its front right paw, bloodied and raw. Garen sniffed the air. Among the scent of burnt fur, he detected a sour, meaty aroma. Disappointing, he thought, wrinkling his nose. Smells like a regular frost tiger. I was hoping this one would taste better. He'd tried frost tiger meat before. It wasn't memorable. Below, the wounded beast no longer showed any will to fight. With a low growl, it turned tail and bolted. It ran fast, shockingly fast, especially for something injured, but not fast enough. With a powerful flap of his wings, Garen activated acceleration. His body became a white streak across the sky. Within moments, he intercepted the frost tiger, landing directly in its path. Cornered and desperate, the beast's eyes lit with savage resolve. It roared and charged again, ignoring its injuries. But just as it crossed the 20-meter mark, Garen vanished from its vision. Gone, as if he had never been there. Alarm bells rang in the tiger's instincts. It felt danger behind it. It turned. A gleaming, scale-covered dragon fist was the last thing it saw before. Thud! The punch landed squarely on its skull. Unlike the white dragoness, this tiger had no magical protection. Its legs buckled, and it collapsed, shaking the earth. Garen retracted his fist and flexed his wrist. When time stands still, even beasts become helpless. The tiger wasn't dead, but it was severely wounded. It let out a weak, pained roar. Despite its strength, Garen found it lacking. Even stronger than the northern berserk bears, he thought, but not tasty. Still, he was intrigued. This beast, in its berserk state, had put up an impressive fight. If he could tame it, it would make a formidable subordinate, stronger than any of his current followers. Even his dragon-vein ogres couldn't provide a challenge like this. And the bear cubs he'd been raising, they were far from ready. Without his time powers, Garen wouldn't have won so easily. He made up his mind. Unleashing the full force of his draconic might, he let it crash over the wounded beast. The frost tiger trembled. Its spirit, already weakened by pain, cracked under the pressure. It fought to remain conscious, but it was no use. With a final, reluctant growl, the beast collapsed into unconsciousness. Garen grabbed it with one claw, spread his wings, and ascended into the skies. He carried the frost tiger back to his domain on the ice cliff. A new follower, a new possibility, and perhaps, with time, a new weapon. Ferocious beasts were exceptionally rare. Until now, Garen had only encountered 2 or 3 in total. And of them, this ferocious frost tiger was the largest and most formidable. After returning to his ice cliff territory, Garen gave the order, and the Arctic ice spirits worked together to construct a massive ice crystal cage, encasing the tiger within. To reinforce it further, Garen breathed a layer of frost dragon breath over it, ensuring the wounded beast couldn't escape. Curious, the 2 violent bear cubs waddled over for a look. But the moment the frost tiger awoke and glared at them with bloodshot eyes, they squealed in fright and scurried behind Garen for safety. Once they realized the tiger couldn't harm them, however, they began provoking it with their own clumsy imitation of a dragon's presence. Garen had to shoo them away. As the tiger's wounds began to heal, Garen unleashed his dragon might again to test its will. The beast trembled but still refused to lower its head. It met Garen's gaze with fierce defiance. But Garen was patient. He stationed a few Arctic ice spirits to guard the cage and flew off, leaving the tiger to stew in its confinement. A week passed. When Garen returned, he found the frost tiger weakened and gaunt. Starved, it had been gnawing futilely at the magically reinforced cage. At full strength, it might have broken free. Now it was barely clinging to consciousness. With cold detachment, Garen placed a massive hind leg of a strength mammoth outside the cage. The bloodied meat instantly captured the tiger's attention. Its nose twitched, its pupils dilated, and drool spilled from its mouth. It growled in frustration, pacing and staring at Garen with desperate hunger. Then, Garen unleashed his dragon might once more. The tiger's body trembled. Its hunger, injuries, instincts, and the overwhelming presence of a true dragon finally broke its resolve. It averted its gaze, lay down, and let out a low, miserable whimper. "I like you better when you were snarling," Garen remarked, almost amused. He tossed the mammoth leg into the cage. The frost tiger devoured it ravenously. Afterward, it rose to its feet, regaining a portion of its former dignity. But when it looked at Garen now, there was submission in its eyes. Garen opened the cage. The tiger stepped out cautiously and let out a roar that echoed across the cliffs. The bear cubs, watching from afar, froze in place and began trembling again. The frost tiger turned toward Garen, lowered its head, and approached slowly. Garen reached out and rubbed its head, smiling. Finally, a follower I don't have to be delicate with. 2 days later, once it had regained its strength, the tiger underwent the dragon vein transformation. Garen spent a considerable amount of his own dragon blood to infuse it, altering its lineage. The resulting kin would be more loyal and better attuned to his will. He had waited only because the tiger's weakened state couldn't have handled the transformation earlier. Once the ritual was complete, the tiger collapsed into a deep, magical sleep. Dragon Vein Berserker Seed. Finally, a true powerhouse under my command, Garen thought with satisfaction. He turned back to his lair and slept peacefully. Another week passed. When Garen opened his eyes, he sensed a powerful presence nearby, faintly draconic, yet not fully. It resonated with his own aura. He stepped out of the lair. Hovering in the air was a massive white tiger, now transformed. Its claws were like blades, and beneath its thick fur lay a layer of scaled armor. Two curved dragon horns jutted from its skull. The body was unchanged, but its aura had grown immensely stronger. Garen descended with a pleased expression. The tiger bowed slightly, nudging its head forward. Garen examined its horns and pressed a claw against its metallic scales. With a little pressure, small cracks formed, but not enough to pierce deeply. Still inferior to true dragon scales, but it's a layer of decent protection. "Show me your strength," Garen commanded. In response, the frost tiger sneezed a few times, then opened its mouth and unleashed a cone of icy wind filled with sharp ice crystals. It wasn't as destructive as dragon breath, but matched the power of a third circle spell. Spell-like abilities, and it still has its beastly combat instincts. Garen nodded, satisfied. From that day forward, he began sending the tiger on hunts. Compared to the Arctic spirits and ogres, its efficiency and success were remarkable. On one occasion, it even brought back a three-headed cold snake lizard, a formidable magical creature equal to a young white dragon in strength. Thanks to this, Garen now dined on higher quality prey, accelerating his growth and bringing his next evolution closer. The sky darkened. Thunder rumbled overhead, and heavy clouds blanketed the horizon. A cold wind howled, and rain began to fall, an extremely rare event in the far north, where snow reigned supreme almost year-round. Rainy days were special to Garen. He liked to sleep through them, letting the rumble of thunder lull him into peace. But just as he began to drift off, something powerful shattered the stillness. A pure, oppressive dragon might rolled through the territory, heading straight for his lair. All the creatures nearby, except the frost tiger, were paralyzed with fear. Their limbs went weak as they looked skyward. "Dragon might," Garen muttered, eyes narrowing. It was no imitation. It was the supernatural aura of a true dragon. He rose and peered outside. Through the rain, a humanoid figure, only 1.7 meters tall, flew directly into his domain, unaffected by the intense dragon aura it radiated. A clear, graceful voice rang out in the ancient tongue of dragons. "Salia, come out. I have something to say to you." The words pierced the storm and echoed in Garen's lair. Is she here for the White Dragon Maiden? One of her sisters, perhaps? Garen's eyes sharpened as he stepped out, thoughts racing.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
A tiger's roar that could not be suppressed was heard, and Garen could hear the eagerness to try from the ferocious frost tiger's roar. "You're still as brave as ever." Garen nodded in satisfaction. The ferocious beast had a higher resistance to supernatural abilities such as dragons' might than ordinary magical creatures. After the transformation of the dragon bloodline, the impact of the other dragon's might on the ferocious frost tiger was reduced to a negligible extent. At the same time, Garen left the dragon's lair and appeared under the dark clouds. Heavy rain poured down, and raindrops fell from the sky onto Garen's dragon scales, shattering into pieces. With a soft sound, they turned into crystal-clear splashes. The mirror-like white dragon scales reflected the ice plains of the extreme north under the rain curtain, reflecting a woman with golden hair and white skin. Garen hovered in the air, his dragon wings flapping slightly, and rain fell from his body. He sized up the woman in front of him, and a hint of vigilance appeared in his eyes. The raindrops fell in a chain, but when they landed around the woman, They automatically parted to one side, allowing her body to remain dry and fresh in the rain. She had a head of bright and dazzling light golden hair that was like a waterfall, and her exposed skin was milky, white like milk, as if it was glowing slightly. Her appearance was exquisite, and her facial features seemed to have been carefully sculpted by craftsmen. She had silver-white pupils, long eyelashes, and full cherry lips. She looked like a very beautiful and charming young female human. She wore a white dress with lace edges, a silver necklace around her neck, and small accessories on her earlobes. She had an elegant and gentle temperament. However, under this extremely deceptive appearance, Garen could clearly feel the dragon might that was much stronger than the white dragon lady. This was an adult true dragon in human form. Moreover, it was not an ordinary true dragon. Garen's eyes were alert. He thought for a while and said in a low voice, "Salia is not here. This territory belongs to me now." On the other side, the human-shaped true dragon looked at Garen suspiciously, as if trying to distinguish what kind of dragon he was. White dragon. White dragons shouldn't have dragon horns. Moreover, its body was much more majestic than the white dragon's. It had the body of a young dragon, but its scales were brand new like a newborn dragon, as if it had never experienced the baptism of time. "If Salia isn't here, I should be looking for you." The true dragon in human form spoke in the dragon language in an elegant tone. It didn't sound like it had any ill intentions. After a pause, a friendly smile appeared on her face, and she said in a pleasant voice, "We're both true dragons. Aren't you going to invite me in? I have something to discuss with you." It's raining heavily outside. He wasn't looking for the white dragon maiden. Garen thought of the two children. They said they wanted to seek shelter with a friend of the old wizard. This true dragon of unknown origins was most likely a friend of the old mage. Garen's wariness was greatly reduced. With the constraint of the oath, unless she deliberately wanted the two children to die miserably, she would not have any thoughts of causing trouble for him. Because she had learned of her existence from her two children, she had indirectly entered the scope of the oath's influence. In addition, the appearance of the dragon's might did not mean a declaration of war or provocation to the dragon. It was similar to a polite greeting by knocking on the door, informing the owner of the territory of his arrival. The kind of restraining the dragon's might and quietly barging into the territory without a word was the rhythm of war. When she saw Garen, she had already retracted her dragon's might, and the terrified followers in the territory gradually returned to normal. "If there's anything, you can say it here." Garen's voice was calm as he said. The human-shaped true dragon was slightly stunned, but he did not react to Garen's cold attitude. He smiled and said, "I came here with good intentions. You don't have to be so wary of me." Garen pondered for a moment and muttered, "If that's the case, then reveal your true form." Although he already had some guesses in his heart, he still wanted to confirm it. Knowing what kind of dragon the other party was, no matter what her purpose was, she would be able to choose a more suitable way to deal with it. On the other side, the human-shaped true dragon listened to Garen's words, and the dragon-type aura on his body became more and more intense. A burst of light appeared on her body, and her clothes turned into silver-white dragon scales. Dragon wings extended from her back, sharp dragon claws, and a slender dragon tail. In just a breath's time, a silver dragon that seemed to be made of pure metal with shining scales appeared in Garen's vision. It had a bright silver mask, very thick dragon wings, two smooth and shiny small dragon horns, and a silver fold on the dragon's head, which extended from the top of the head to the end of the dragon's tail. "It's Silver Dragon." Garen looked at the silver dragon and could clearly feel the powerful energy in its body. This adult silver dragon was 21 meters long. It was already a super large true dragon. It had a strong visual impact and an imposing aura. If we were to fight, I might not be able to defeat her now. She's much stronger than the white dragon maiden. Garen thought to himself, other than the seventh circle spell scroll, which was his trump card, it would be difficult for him to defeat an adult silver dragon even if he exhausted the power of time. With the opponent's size, as long as he could hit Garen once, it would be enough to determine the outcome of the battle. Among the 15 commonly seen true dragons on the main material plane, the strongest among the chromatic dragons was the red dragon, the metal dragon was the gold dragon, and the gem dragon was the amethyst dragon. If one were to rank the 15 types of true dragons, the most powerful would undoubtedly be the golden dragon. Silver dragons and red dragons had similar strength at the same age group. When they reached adulthood, they would be equivalent to an old white dragon over 400 years old. As true dragons, there was a reason why the white dragon was called the shame of the dragon. In addition, every golden dragon lived under the watch of Bahamut, the god of good dragons. When this god descended, he would even bring along the young golden dragons and was very protective of them. His attention on the silver dragon was weaker, but not by much. The golden dragon and the silver dragon were not to be trifled with. In addition to their strong strength, they were also quite united. If they could not win, they would call their friends and bully the few with numbers. They might even attract the dragon god's incarnation. However, the metal dragons were gentle and friendly, and the gold and silver dragons were the best of them. They often selflessly helped the weak creatures. They were saints in the true sense of the word, not saints. Unless it was a very evil existence, they rarely took the initiative to attack, and the measures they took were mainly to discuss and talk. Garen didn't think that he was very evil. He had his own bottom line. He was not kind, but he was not evil either. If it had been a pure, evil dragon, the two children would not have been able to walk out of the dragon's territory no matter what. You can call me Luna. The silver dragon Luna looked at Garen and kept her distance from him, indicating that she had no ill intentions. She had already shown enough sincerity, so Garen nodded and said, "Come in." He turned around and entered the dragon's nest, followed by the silver dragon Luna. When they reached the edge of the dragon's nest, light appeared on her body again, and she shrank into the appearance of a female human. With an apologetic expression, she explained, "This dragon's lair is a little too small for me. I'll just use my human form." On the surface, Luna's strength was much stronger than Garen's, but she didn't seem to realize this, so she didn't show the arrogance of a dragon, and her attitude was very friendly. Garen's expression was strange as he shook his head. "It's fine." All dragons were proud, and the silver dragon was no exception. However, the silver dragon's pride was a little different. For example, the red dragon's proud attitude was, "I'm very powerful. You have to kneel when you see me and offer all your wealth." The silver dragons were proud because they thought they were too outstanding and could easily hurt the pride of other creatures. Therefore, they were very humble and friendly. They would also frequently shrink in size because their huge dragon bodies could easily cause damage to their surroundings. Luna's humbleness was also a sign of arrogance. She thought that she was better than Garen, and in order to take care of Garen's self-esteem, she was very polite. Garen suspected that she had transformed into a human not only because the dragon's nest was a little small for her, but most likely to take care of his feelings, because Luna's body size was twice that of Garen's. "I'm a time dragon, but the silver dragon is taking care of my self-esteem." Garen was speechless. "You can call me Garen." His voice paused for a moment, and Garen asked directly, "You're here for the two descendants of Molten?" Luna was sitting on a piece of ice crystal with her legs together in a ladle-like posture. After hearing Garen's question, she nodded and said, "Yes, but not completely." She considered her words and said with an awkward expression, "I'm here for Morton's relics, his red flame staff, and his research notes." As if to avoid a misunderstanding, she added, "They already belong to you, so I'll use items of equal value to exchange for them. I hope you can agree." Garen observed her expression and did not answer her directly. Instead, he asked, "What's your relationship with Morton? Are his relics important to you?" Luna was silent for a moment, and then she said with an awkward expression, "When I first became an adult, I traveled to the human countries and met Morton. He was my human friend and helped me a lot. Now that Morton is dead and his two descendants have found me, I can't just sit by and do nothing. I'll take care of them until they become adults. His grandson is quite talented in evocation spells, but I don't know much about it. So I want Molten's red flame staff and research notes so that I can better teach him magic knowledge." There were no problems with the content. However, Luna's voice sounded very nervous, and she was stammering. At the same time, her brows were furrowed, and her eyes were wandering. "I don't believe you," Garen said honestly. On the other side, Luna's mouth was slightly open, and her face was red. Her voice was a little muffled, and her expression was one of struggle and reluctance. Garen watched her patiently. Her strange state lasted for a few minutes. After a long sigh, the silver dragon returned to its elegant appearance and smiled at Garen. "I'm still not good at lying. Please don't take offense." Garen was at a loss for words. So it was because he was lying that he acted so strangely. He found it hard to understand, but he was greatly surprised. "Then stop lying and tell me the real reason why you need these things," Garen said in a low voice. After obtaining the red flame staff and those notes, Garen had studied them a lot. At first, he didn't notice anything strange, but as he used the red flame staff more and more, he could vaguely feel an inexplicable connection somewhere in the south. The connection was weak, but it did exist. As for the notes, he didn't find any problems with them. Luna hesitated for a long time, but she didn't tell Garen the truth. "I'm sorry, I can't tell you." After a pause, Luna said to Garen with a sincere expression, "Trust me, neither the red flame staff nor Morton's notes are of any use to you." "Why would I?" Garen asked with a smile. Luna raised her head and looked at Garen. "You should be a white dragon. Although you give me a different feeling from ordinary white dragons, not as unreasonable, fierce, and evil as them. You are indeed a white dragon, right?" "You're right," Garen nodded and said calmly. His appearance was similar to that of a white dragon, but he was much more handsome and mighty. In the aesthetic sense of dragons, he was a handsome dragon. The red flame staff can only enhance fire-type spells. His notes should be about the study of fireball. "You're a white dragon. Do you like these things?" White dragons had always hated fire. However, Garen was essentially a time dragon, so he was deeply loved by all kinds of elemental energy and would not favor one over the other. All the elemental energy was his wings. In the face of Luna's question, Garen used his actions to answer. He chanted a spell, and the surrounding fire elemental energy obediently gathered, forming a small fireball the size of a pea, floating in front of Garen. "I'm a white dragon, but not an ordinary white dragon. To me, the fire element is no different from any other element. It's the opposite of what you think. I love the red flame staff, and Molten's notes are of great help to me." In front of Garen, Luna's beautiful eyes widened in disbelief. She was shocked for more than 10 seconds before she slowly calmed down. He was just a young white dragon, and he had learned the fireball technique by himself? It was unprecedented. She was a little confused now. Looking at Garen's skillful way of casting spells, she had reason to believe that this strange white dragon had already mastered a higher circle spell. At the same time, Garen seemed to be shrouded in mystery in Luna's eyes. "I won't give you the red flame staff or the notebook. If there's nothing else, please leave." Garen asked the guest to leave. At the same time, he squinted his eyes slightly, and the power of time was ready to go. Luna was now within 20 meters of him, and it would take some time for her to transform from a human to a dragon. If she was unwilling to give up and showed hostility towards the two children, Garen would immediately activate Time Stop and use the 7-circle scroll. It would be difficult to kill her, but it was still possible to severely injure her and keep her far away. However, the consequences of doing so would be more serious. It was very likely that he would face the revenge of more than one silver dragon. Although the metallic dragon was kind, it did not mean that it was weak and easy to bully. Under Garen's gaze, Luna's face showed a depressed look, and she said, Okay, I know." Garen heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he sighed in his heart that the metal dragon was indeed a kind and honest dragon. Even after being rejected by him, it did not have any evil thoughts. If all living creatures had the same personality as them, then many worlds would have fewer disputes and casualties. "Please go back." Garen once again ordered him to leave. He did not want to stay in the same room with an adult silver dragon for too long, even if it was a rather pretty female dragon. In Garen's eyes, Luna's shiny silver scales and her large, slender dragon body were quite beautiful and mesmerizing. He was a little tempted. However, this feeling was very subtle and not enough for Garen to take action. If he wanted to find a partner, he would rather find someone on the same level as him than a gold dragon, silver dragon, or red dragon. If you don't want to tell me, I won't ask again, but I won't give it to you either. On the other hand, after hearing Garen's slightly cold words, Luna was a little troubled, and her fingers twirled her long golden hair. It was obvious that she really wanted Molten's relic. She thought for a few seconds before saying, "Then can you give me Morton's notes? I'll give you something more valuable than his notes." His notes are just simple notes. As she was afraid that Garen would continue to reject her, she continued, "In addition, I promised to help you once, but the premise is that it must be a kind and righteous thing." Garen frowned and said unhappily, "I've already made it very clear. No matter what conditions you offer, I won't agree to them." Although he had memorized the contents of Morton's notes, which were of no use to him, he felt that there might be something hidden in the notes because of the abnormality of the red flame staff. He just hadn't discovered it yet. At the same time, Luna sighed and asked tentatively, "Are you really not going to consider it? I'm willing to exchange it with dragon soul stones." "I won't," Garen snorted and said firmly. Before he finished, he paused and said in surprise, "Dragon's soul stone? You have a dragon's soul stone?" One could not blame Garen for his reaction. The dragon soul stone was a very rare and special stone. In the vicinity of an ancient dragon's lair, there was a very small chance of producing dragon soul stones due to the contamination of the ancient dragon's aura and the miraculous evolution. The lifespan of an ordinary true dragon was limited. If there were no accidents, they would die at the age of an 800-year-old extreme elder dragon. Only by breaking through the boundary of life and death could one become an ancient dragon and extend their life. Even their enemy true dragons would show full respect to ancient dragons. True dragons above ancient dragons were the most feared existences of other creatures, and they were extremely rare. The dragon soul stone could only be produced in an ancient dragon's lair. With such harsh conditions, its effect was naturally extraordinary. The dragon soul stone could allow a true dragon to obtain extraordinary benefits during its evolution and hibernation. The effect of one hibernation was equivalent to 2 or 3 normal times. It was a rare treasure for a true dragon, especially for a true dragon that had yet to reach adulthood. It could greatly shorten the growth period of a true dragon. Seeing Garen's interest in the dragon soul stone, Luna's eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "Yes, I have 2 dragon soul stones. I used one for myself, and I still have one left." The effect of the first dragon soul stone was the best, and it was a waste to use it multiple times. There were 2. Garen could guess where Luna's dragon soul stone came from, and he couldn't help but feel a little envious. The familial bond between metallic dragons was much better than that of the chromatic dragons. If the younger one was provoked, the older one would definitely come for revenge without a second word. This was especially true for the gold and silver dragons. If they were to provoke them too much, it was highly possible that they would end up provoking the dragon god Bahamut. Since there was a dragon soul stone, there was a high chance that there was an elder at the ancient dragon level behind this female silver dragon. The dragon soul stone. Garen's expression changed, and he hesitated. Seeing that Garen was already moved, but had yet to make up his mind, Luna thought for a moment and smiled gently. "How about this? You can think about it for a while. It just so happens that I don't have a dragon soul stone with me. It's not too late for you to make your decision the next time I bring the dragon soul stone over." Garen nodded. "Sure, let's do that," he said. Luna had no intention of leaving even after they had finished discussing the important matters. She looked at Garen curiously, her eyes wandering around his body, mainly focusing on the 4 dragon horns and the ring of black scales on his neck. Especially the dragon horn. In a dragon's aesthetic sense, the thickness and length of a dragon's horn were very important decisive factors. A true dragon with long and thick dragon horns would be very attractive to true dragons of the opposite sex. Garen had dragon horns, and not just 2, but 2 pairs. A normal true dragon would only have 1 pair of dragon horns. Under Luna's curious gaze, Garen felt a little uncomfortable and said unhappily, "What are you looking at?" The adult humanoid silver dragon blushed and confessed, "I'm looking at your dragon horns. Sorry, this is the first time I've seen a real dragon with 2 pairs of dragon horns. They're very special and very beautiful. So you're attracted by my appearance." Garen's displeasure disappeared, and he said magnanimously, "See, I don't mind." Luna was too embarrassed to look at him any longer. She looked away and asked, "This used to be Salia's territory. How is she now?" Garen didn't want to talk about it anymore. "I don't know," he said simply. "I just drove her away." With the time mark, he could easily track the white dragon lady's movements as long as he wanted to. However, Garen had not actively searched for her location, so there was no communication between the two. Luna nodded and didn't ask any more questions. "You are the strangest white dragon I have ever seen." At the same time, Garen thought that there must be more than these true dragons living in the ice plains of the extreme north. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Luna, do you know how many true dragons live in the icy plains of the extreme north?" Luna blinked her eyes and asked, "The entire northern ice fields?" "I don't know." Garen changed his way of speaking. "It's not too far from my territory. Do you know if there are any other true dragons?" Luna lowered her head and thought for a moment. "Past your dragon's nest, there's a female crystal dragon that's about to reach adulthood on a snow mountain 400 miles further north. There are 2 male white dragons 600 miles to the west. One is in his prime, and the other has just reached adulthood. I'm not too sure about the rest." After a pause, Luna seemed to have thought of something funny, and she said, "I know about the crystal dragon and Salia because the crystal dragon wanted to steal Salia's dragon egg in the past. It fought its way to my territory. If she succeeds, maybe a kind white dragon will appear in the ice plains of the extreme north." There is such a thing? Garen was stunned. If she succeeded, her white dragon lady might become a crystal dragon lady. Garen thought to himself, gem dragons were neutral, and crystal dragons were the most friendly of the gem dragons, somewhat similar to metal dragons. If they were born in the nest of a crystal dragon, they would have a much better time when they were just born. As he thought of this, Garen felt that it was a pity that the crystal dragon did not succeed in stealing the egg. After the 2 dragons chatted for a while, Luna suddenly looked outside the dragon's nest and said with a little envy, "Berserkers are very rare. There's not a single berserker among my followers, and they're all berserkers." Garen laughed. He had a good impression of Luna, so his voice was not as cold as before. Indeed, the berserker species is different from ordinary magical creatures. It took me a lot of effort to subdue it. As Garen was speaking, Luna stood up and smiled. "I'm leaving. I hope you can agree to my request the next time we meet." Garen didn't promise anything and said quietly, "I will consider it." After that, Luna didn't return to her dragon form. She still maintained her human form. She cast a spell, and a pair of faint cloud wings spread out from her back, flying out of Garen's dragon nest. A strong and deep roar came from below. The ferocious frost tiger was full of hostility towards Luna. When it saw her leaving Garen's dragon nest, it roared again and again, not afraid of the true dragon aura on her body at all. Garen released his dragon's might, which contained his own consciousness, to calm down the violent frost tiger. At the same time, he climbed onto the bed covered with gemstones again. He took out all 16 of Molten's notes and carefully read them one by one. Magic power circulated. An array of light flashed in the dragon's eyes. The detect light spell was activated. Garen flipped through the notebook page by page, his eyes scanning through every line of writing, hoping to find something unusual. However, as time passed, he did not find anything unusual even after he had read through all 16 notebooks very carefully. No matter how he looked at them, there was nothing else worth paying attention to other than the knowledge content they contained. The notebook itself was made of high-quality papyrus paper, which contained a weak amount of magic power and could be used to make low-level spell scrolls. However, even so, it was still ordinary in Garen's eyes. There were no hidden layers inside, and Garen did not find any secret words or signals. He carefully held a notebook in his hand as he began to recall Luna's various words and expressions. The silver dragon was not good at lying, so he could tell her real purpose from this. After thinking for more than 10 minutes, Garen looked at the red flame staff beside him and thought, could it be that she lied just for the red flame staff, and Morton's notes were really for Yamos to learn spells? When Luna said that she wanted to trade for Molten's notes, her expression and posture were normal. However, he couldn't rule out the possibility that her main purpose was actually the notes. Previously, she might have deliberately pretended that she couldn't lie for Garen to see. I'm probably overthinking it. She probably won't lie, Garen thought to himself. He picked up the red flame staff and looked at the crystal at the top. Inside the crystal, there was a liquid that kept moving like a flame. It was like a blooming flower of fire, which was extraordinarily beautiful and mysterious. The main body of the red flame staff was made of some kind of high-level magic material, but Garen could see that its core was the mysterious crystal at the top. No matter how high-level the material of the main body of the staff was, it would not be as high-level as this crystal. He focused his mind and injected his magic power into the red flame staff. A fiery red elemental light rose and rolled, and the surrounding temperature rose. At the same time, Garen looked towards the south. That feeling came back again. He vaguely felt a connection, not with him, but with the red flame staff. It seemed to be more than a staff and contained other secrets. It's normal for a high-level mage's relic to have some secrets. Garen focused his mind, and the red flame staff on his fingertips was surrounded by a red spirit light. From the contents of the notes, it could be seen that Morton was not an ordinary high-level wizard. He had been a high-level wizard for decades, but he had been stuck at the 7th circle because of his injuries. Casting higher circle spells required him to pay the price of his life. If there were no accidents, this gifted mage in the School of Evocation might even enter the legendary realm. The things he left behind were worth taking seriously. If it's just for the sake of giving Molten's descendants better learning resources, a dragon soul stone, Garen's gaze shifted, and he suddenly felt that he might have fallen into a misunderstanding. He had been trying to figure out Luna's motives in his own way, but Luna's personality was completely different from his. She didn't even know how to lie. Garen had stolen the Dragon Lady's gems since he was born. What was not worth it for Garen might be worth it in Luna's eyes, since they had different values. The Silver Dragon liked to make friends, especially humans, leaving behind stories that people yearned for. Silver dragons and red dragons often fought, but the red dragon always lost more than it won. This was because the silver dragon would unite its friends instead of fighting alone. Once they decided on a good friend relationship, they would always treat it with sincerity and passion. So, in order for Amos to learn evocation spells better, it was very likely that she would pay the Dragon Soul Stone as the price. But I can't be sure yet. Garen continued to flip through the notes. This process was not boring to him. Reading it over and over again could deepen his understanding of the contents. He spent the whole day studying the contents of the notebook, but in the end, he only gained a deeper understanding of his experiences and nothing else. Garen still could not find the abnormality in the notebook. When Luna comes with the Dragon Soul Stone, if she still doesn't find any problems, then make this deal with her. He made a decision in his heart. To Garen, the Dragon Soul Stone was of great value. Every time he fell into a deep sleep, his strength would increase by a large margin. The same deep sleep allowed his strength to grow much stronger than the other true dragons. With the Dragon Soul Stone, he could develop the abilities of the Time Dragon as soon as possible. Garen's ambition wasn't big. It would be enough if he could master the abilities of a normal Time Dragon while using the Dragon Soul Stone. As for the possible secrets hidden in the notebook, a secret that he had never been able to discover was of no use to him. Also, just because Luna needed it didn't mean that he needed it too. There is a certain difference in the value of things in the eyes of the two. After thinking it through, Garen stopped staring at the notes. He put all the notes and the red flame staff into the space ring, then put the space ring in his mouth and pressed it under his tongue like a 7th circle spell scroll. At this moment, Garen was once again amazed by the deftness of his tongue. He could even control his tongue to twist into an S shape for a moment, and then into a wavy shape for a moment. At the same time, a low roar of a ferocious frost tiger came from outside the dragon's nest. Garen's gaze shifted, and he walked out to look down. The rare storm had stopped, so the ground was muddy and full of water, unlike its usual silver-covered appearance. However, it wouldn't take long for the water to freeze. After a few more snowfalls, the scenery would be restored. The fur of the ferocious frost tiger was stained with water as it dragged a dying ice-howling beast. The ice howler that looked like a bull but had the body of a mammoth was a magic creature. It was very powerful. Other than the ferocious frost tiger, it was difficult to provide it with any other followers. Garen looked at the ferocious frost tiger in admiration and flew down to stroke its head. "Well done. Go back and rest." It lowered its head and gently rubbed against Garen's dragon claws. Its actions were intimate, and it no longer had its initial unruly appearance. After dawdling for a few seconds, it slowly returned to its own tiger's den. At the bottom of the ice cliff, the ferocious frost tiger dug out a simple black hole for itself. It usually rested inside. Garen grabbed the ice-howling beast and returned to the nest to have a full meal. He was a little tired after studying the notes for a whole day, so after eating, he lay on the bed with gemstones, adjusted his angle, and closed his eyes to sleep. At the same time, heavy iron hooves passed through the Dragon's Pine Ridge in the south and advanced solemnly toward the icy plains in the extreme north. After the storm, the Arctic tundra was now sunny and cloudless. It was a rare good weather. Many creatures of the tundra were out and enjoying the gentle touch of the sun, and so were the magic creatures. Since he had tasted the sweetness of searching for prey in the south, Woogabones often moved south when he went out to hunt. Within this week, it had already brought its tribesmen to hunt 3 large magic creatures. They were all heavily injured and temporarily placed in the Ogre Basin, waiting for the right time to offer them as tributes to Garen. Garen's request was 1 per week, but Wooga Shattered Bones was always completed by a supermodel and was very diligent. Apart from the ferocious frost tiger, only dragon vein ogres like Wooga Shattered Bones could provide Garen with higher quality food. The hunting team formed by the followers of the Arctic ice spirits, dinosaurs, and white hounds could provide more normal quality food. They had many people, but they did not have high-end combat power. At this moment, a total of 5 ogres were carrying large nail hammers or large wooden clubs. They were wearing simple tanned animal skin clothes and were slowly walking through the northern ice field under the sun. After a while, Wooga Shattered Bones was stunned and looked at the ogres. Just as they crossed a low ice mountain, 12 human figures appeared in their field of vision nearly 1,000 meters away. 11 of these humans were strong and agile. They were wearing simple light armors with anti-cold enchantments. They had crossbows on their right waists and weapons on their left waists. They were walking with strict and careful steps, looking left and right, observing their surroundings. The other person was wearing a gray robe and was about 30 years old. He held a short and simple staff and had a badge on his chest. The humans were stunned when they saw the 5 giant-like dragon ogres. Wooga Shattered Bones looked up at the sky and couldn't help but sigh. Once again, I thanked nature for its gift. It felt that its luck had been too good recently. The great master of the true dragon didn't like to eat children with soft skin and tender meat, but these adult humans might be to his taste. A few seconds after the ogres and the humans met, before the ogres could attack, the human mage shouted, "It's the ogres. These big idiots aren't easy to deal with. Be careful." He chanted an incantation and waved his staff gently. A layer of elemental light appeared on the bodies of the humans around him. Level 1 spell, Light Body. Wooga Bones knew that this fellow was casting a spell. He roared and took the lead, followed by the rest of the dragon vein ogres. When the 5 tank-like ogres ran with all their might, the ground shook violently. The human team's expressions changed. Especially as they got closer, they could see the true size of the dragon vein ogre. All of them were more than 3 meters tall, and their bodies were covered in fine scales. Their violent aura made it hard for people to breathe. The human mage's fingers turned white, and he hurriedly chanted an incantation. Before the ogres rushed over, he cast 2 more spells with auxiliary effects on his own people. Second circle spell, weapon enchantment. The weapons of the human soldiers became sharper. Level 1 spell, wooden armor. A layer of vine armor appeared around their upper bodies. At the same time, the ogres roared as they charged into the human defense line. Wooga Bone Crusher was the first to arrive. The 2-meter-long black hammer was swung fiercely, and the powerful force swept out along with the whistling wind. Crash! The expressions of the 3 human soldiers within its attack range changed drastically. Under the tremendous force, their weapons flew out of their hands, and their bodies were sent flying like rag dolls. They felt like the world was spinning. The wooden armor on their bodies shattered at the same time. Although they managed to keep their lives, they had no strength to stand up when they fell to the ground. The human warriors at the side mustered their courage to fight back, but their enchanted weapons could only make small, insignificant cuts on the ogres. "Ha! You weak little thing, are you scratching our itch?" The ogres shouted in Jotun as they continued to attack. They had only just come into contact, but the ferocity they displayed was already terrifying. The scene quickly presented a one-sided crushing situation. The human mages at the back were pale, but they forced themselves to calm down and cast spells. Whoosh! A frost ray landed on an ogre, but apart from making it turn its head and focus on the human mage, it had no other effect. The ogre sneered and jumped high, his tall body crossing the front line of defense and landing heavily in front of the human mage. After a while, a few ogres with minor wounds on their bodies stood in front of a mess of human bodies. Since they knew that Garen liked to eat fresh food, they left these people with their last breath. One of the ogres carried 2 to 3 humans and left in big strides, leaving behind a piece of ground. In the Ice Cliff Dragon's nest, Garen had already woken up and was thinking about whether he should go out hunting and stretch his muscles. Before he could make up his mind, a familiar and excited Jotun voice came from below. "Master, Wooga has something good for you. You'll definitely like it." After hearing Wooga Bone's excited call, Garen's gaze flickered and he left the dragon's lair. A few seconds later, he looked at the ogres and the magical creatures they had brought over with a strange expression. There were also a dozen humans whose life signs were extremely weak. They were basically dead. Could it be that the ogres of the Shatterbone tribe had a body that sucked humans? Why did they capture humans for him, one after another, during this period of time? "Master, Wooga's luck has been very good recently. He has encountered rare and delicious humans one after another." After a pause, Wooga's shattered bones said carefully, "Because they have combat ability, it's not easy to capture them alive. I can only bring them to you after fighting like this." "Wooga, where did you find these humans?" Garen asked. Wooga Crusader thought for a while and said honestly, "To the south. The exact location is about 80 kilometers south of our Broken Bone tribe." Garen didn't say anything. He sized up the humans and pondered. Human? From the looks of it, the humans were still in groups. It seemed that they had entered the icy plains of the extreme north with some purpose and did not barge in here for no reason. Garen had a feeling that their appearance here might be related to Morton. The old mage's escape to the ice plains of the extreme north had caused this cold place that was usually inaccessible to many strange humans. "What kind of human do you like to eat? Please tell Wooga that the next time Wooga meets a suitable one, he will do his best to catch one for you." Wooga Shattered Bones thought that these people were not to Garen's liking, which was why Garen was deep in thought and did not speak for a long time. Hence, he gathered his courage and asked. Garen was at a loss for words. He was a little helpless to this lucky follower who was still insistent on catching human desserts for him. "I don't like to eat people. In the future, if you meet humans again, if you feel that they're special, you can capture them. Try to capture them alive. If they are ordinary people, you can deal with them as you see fit." Wooga Shattered Bones was stunned for a moment before he slowly nodded. "I understand. What do you think of the other 3 magical creatures?" "Yes, you've done well. You're an excellent companion." Garen gave a rare compliment to Wooga Shattered Bones. Its face was immediately filled with joy and happiness as it said happily, "It's my honor to be able to contribute food to the great master. I will continue to work hard and guarantee that I won't let you down." Garen stood at the edge of the dragon's lair, his gaze looking towards the huge mountain range in the south that was as long as a dragon's spine. Due to the frequent appearance of humans recently, as well as the involvement of high-level wizards and adult silver dragons, he was a little uneasy. The people that the ogres had caught this time were dressed like scouts. After much thought, Garen finally decided to head south personally to investigate the situation. Under the sky of the ice plains of the extreme north, a huge dragon that was 12 meters long was galloping at an altitude of 1,000 meters. A faint cloud of mist wrapped around his body, and he looked like a cloud from the ground. Garen cautiously used his spell-like ability, Cloud Mist, to hide his body in the clouds. In that case, when they encountered humans, they would not be detected by detection magic at the first moment. He had long-range vision, so as long as they hid a little deeper, it would be easy for them to discover them before the other party could discover him. They left the Ice Cliff Dragon's nest, passed through the abandoned Ice River territory, and crossed the bowl-shaped ogre basin. The ogres that had just offered their prey to Garen had yet to return, but Garen had already crossed the ogre basin and flew further south. Garen looked down from the sky and gradually realized that the location of the ogre basin was on a very suitable path to move. There were no dangerous ice valley cracks or towering snow mountains in front and behind. From the looks of it, it was not entirely luck that Wooga, Shattered Bones, and the rest had encountered humans so easily. The Broken Bones tribe was located in the south, and they continued to move south when they were hunting. That was the edge of the northern ice field, and the Dragon's Pine Ridge was just further away. In addition, if one didn't know how to fly, many of the steep terrains and the ice plains of the extreme north were not suitable for movement. For creatures like humans and ogres, there weren't many routes that could be taken. The humans from the southern countries wanted to enter the icy plains of the extreme north. Under such circumstances, they were likely to encounter the ogres. As time passed, Garen flew towards the south, and the Dragon's Pine Ridge in his field of vision gradually became clearer. Under his concentration, he could vaguely see a layer of green, dense forest covering the surface of the mountain like a green coat. Soon, he arrived at the location the ogres had mentioned. It was near a low snow mountain. To be more precise, it was just a low snow hill, like a bump on the flat ground. In the clouds, Garen's gaze was low as he looked down. Although he was 1,000 meters high in the sky, he could clearly see a rather dilapidated place with traces of battle and frozen blood on the ground due to his long-range vision. This is the place where the ogres and the human team met. A three-dimensional map appeared in Garen's mind, and he made a mark here. Because of his photographic memory, he could clearly remember the places he flew past and the scenery and terrain he saw. A three-dimensional map would gradually form in his mind, and it would become more complete as he explored the world. As a result, some true dragons had the hobby of traveling the entire continent. At the same time, Garen smelled the scent of a human. He focused his gaze and flapped his dragon wings. His body quickly rose. When there was nothing blocking his vision, he looked into the distance. More than 10 kilometers away, a group of densely packed black dots that looked like ants were moving slowly but firmly. Upon closer inspection, one could see that around these dense black spots, there were even smaller black spots that seemed to be exploring the way. It was a group of fully armed human soldiers, and the scale was not small. There were about 2,000 people. With a thought, the clouds around him became thicker, as if they had merged into the white sky. Not even a dragon scale could be seen. Immediately, Garen controlled his speed and did not create too violent of an air current as he slowly flew towards the human army. A human army of this scale, warriors, spellcasters, priests, and archers would all be present. In order not to be discovered, Garen flew very high. He was surrounded by a sea of clouds, and the sky was as clear as a mirror. When he was close enough to see the other party's layout, Garen carefully sized up this human army of unknown origin. It was about the same as what he had expected. There were about 2,000 of them, and they were mainly cavalry. Their mounts were not ordinary beasts. Their bodies had a faint elemental aura and contained the bloodline of magical creatures. They were still in good condition in the cold, icy plains of the extreme north. These cavalrymen were tall and strong, wearing heavy iron armor, carrying large shields on their backs and swords at their waists. There was no other noise in the entire team except for the sound of their footsteps. The rigorous formation revealed a murderous aura of having experienced hundreds of battles. Garen saw the badge with a thorn pattern. This meant that these people were from the Mo Xia Duchy, the human army of the Ma Xia Duchy. "You're here for the two dead high mages?" Garen muttered to himself. The status of spellcasters had always been high, especially high-ranking wizards. Most of the time, they were influenced by the bloodline of the country or the bonds of human relationships. It was not easy for a country's leader to command a high-ranking mage without a suitable reason. Now, there were two high-level mages who were fighting for the Ma Xia Duchy, but they had lost contact with them in the icy plains of the extreme north. There was a high probability that they had already died. The Ma Xia Duchy wanted to show that they took this matter seriously. No matter what the outcome was, it was necessary to send an army to investigate. If they didn't do anything, the kingdom of Ma Xia would be spurned by the entire spellcaster community, and it would continue to decline in the future. On the Noah continent, a country without spellcasters had no right to speak. With the extremely cold weather of the ice plains of the extreme north, if one were to wear ordinary armor, one would be thankful if they did not freeze to death, let alone march. What moved Garen the most was that the equipment of these knights were all magic items. There were some runes carved on the heavy iron armor, which emitted a subtle elemental aura. Although they were standard products, as long as they were magic items, they would be very expensive to make. For a duchy, if they wanted to train an army of 2,000 people, they would have to pay a considerable price of resources. Or perhaps it's not just to show their attitude. They seem to have a clear goal. Garen was deep in thought. The equipment of these 2,000 soldiers was simply too good. It was only to show their attitude that there was no need to mobilize elites of this level. It was enough to gather a few ordinary soldiers and let them die gloriously in the ice plains of the extreme north. In addition, there was a knight in front of the army who was unusually tall, more than 2 meters tall, with a tiger's back and bear's waist, and extremely burly. His entire face was wrapped in a metal helmet, only revealing a pair of dark brown eyes. Garen could feel a faint threat from this knight. His armor was engraved with runes, and some places were even inlaid with small magic crystals, which were quite bright. It was very likely that he was a high-level warrior with a body as tough as steel. On the Noah continent, other than spellcasters, the other extraordinary power systems were also based on elemental energy, but the methods of use were completely different, and the means were very simple compared to spellcasters. A high-level warrior could not be compared to a high-level wizard in terms of status or strength. If it was a high-level wizard, the other party might have already noticed Garen's existence. Wizards had many detection methods, and it was difficult to escape the detection of a high-level wizard just by using the cloud spell. However, this did not mean that the high-level warriors were weak. Among the heavy-armored knights, there were many spellcasters, priests, and other existences mixed in. They constantly cast auxiliary spells to help the army advance. There was no one among them that Garen was afraid of. The sudden appearance of such a powerful army in the northern ice field that was rarely visited by humans made Garen slightly shocked. But whether it's the two high-ranking mages who pursued us all the way from the southern dukedom to the icy plains of the extreme north, or this powerful army, they've already exceeded the scope of pursuit. The pursuit was to eliminate the enemy and prevent the other party from retaliating. However, it was not worth it to mobilize such a high-level army. If it was just to kill Morton, the price they had paid had far exceeded their gains. Unless Moulton had something in his hands that they were willing to pay such a high price to get. Garen moved his tongue and touched the space ring under his tongue. Red flame staff. There was something wrong with this staff. What was the source of that faint connection? The ice field of the extreme north was extremely vast. This team of 2,000 people was not small, but it was still insignificant in the ice field of the extreme north. Garen hid in the clouds and observed their trajectory. At the same time, he turned his head and looked down at the surrounding terrain from a high altitude, speculating the possible route that the human army might have chosen. As time passed, Garen's face gradually darkened. If there were no accidents, they would pass by the Ogre Basin. However, this was not what Garen was worried about. He saw the spellcasters in the army close their eyes and use some kind of detection spell. After they opened their eyes, they pointed out the direction, and the target was clearly in the direction of the Ogre Basin. A divination spell. They followed the traces left behind by Morton. If this continued, they would find the Ice Cliff Dragon nest sooner or later. Amos and Lilith had been brought to the Ice Cliff territory by the ogres, and the simple minds of the ogres did not have the intention to hide their tracks. If someone were to use magic to investigate, it would be easy for them to chase after them. It was a fully armed elite army of 2,000, with a large number of extraordinary warriors and spellcasters. Garen had no confidence in winning. Not to mention 2,000 people. Such an elite team would have the power to kill a dragon without even 1,000 people. The soldiers here were not ordinary humans. Most of them were extraordinary warriors who could tear tigers, leopards, and wild beasts apart. If the White Dragon Maiden saw such an army, she would immediately run away. Dragons could fly, but spellcasters could use anti-air spells such as sealing the sky to drag the dragon from the air to the ground. All spellcasters in the army had means to deal with enemies in the air. However, with Garen's speed, even if his flight was restricted, if he wanted to leave, these people would not be able to stop him, unless there were traps like barriers and seals in the vicinity. But even so, the fact that his flying ability was easily suppressed still made Garen very dissatisfied. I don't have a way to break this sky-sealing spell. In the future, I have to find a way to fly that won't be affected by this kind of magic. Otherwise, I'll always be restrained and afraid of the consequences. Garen had this thought in his mind. He didn't take the risk of attacking the army alone. After observing their movements for another half an hour, he hid in the clouds and began to turn back. There were many advantages to having such a large group of people travel together. They would not be easily attacked and could help each other. However, it had its own shortcomings, and they were more obvious. Their movement speed was determined by the slowest group in the team, so their progress was relatively slow. It would still take a long time to cross the vast ice field and reach the Ice Cliff Dragon nest. Before they arrived at the Ice Cliff Dragon's nest, Garen had enough time to gather his followers and plan the attack first. He didn't want to give up the territory he had just settled down. If he had to face this human army and they found out that he had Molten's relic, a war would break out. Garen didn't like to sit and wait for death. Instead of waiting for them to come to him, he would rather take the initiative to attack. Extreme northern ice spirits, terror lizards, white hounds, ogres. If all his followers were gathered, they would be a strong force that could be put to use at this time. As he passed by the Ogre Basin, Garen stopped. Wooga Shattered Bones had just returned with a group of ogres. When they saw Garen, they all looked puzzled, not knowing why Garen was here. Garen descended to a low altitude and looked at Woogabone's crusher. He said in a deep voice, "Take all the clansmen of the Broken Bone tribe who can fight and head to the Ice Cliff territory. Wait for my order and welcome a war with the human army." Wooga Shattered Bones looked at Garen's serious expression and his heart trembled. "As you command, the warriors of Broken Bone tribe will fight for you." It had happened so suddenly that Woogabone's crusher did not know the reason, but he knew that he only had to follow Garen's orders. Roar! Roar! When the ogres heard that there was going to be a battle with the humans, they raised their ferocious large weapons and roared excitedly. They were ogres, but they had never seen many humans in their lives. At this moment, they were quite excited, and their eyes were filled with a strong desire to fight. Not long after, Garen returned to the Ice Cliff territory, gathered the ice spirits of the extreme north, and told them about the upcoming war. The hunting team, don't go out for the time being. Gather your strength and don't relax. The number of Arctic ice spirits that could fight in the Ice River tribe was currently around 150. The 300 or so newborns did not have any battle power yet. Each Arctic ice spirit was equivalent to a 2-ring spellcaster. However, their techniques were very simple, and they were much weaker than an ordinary 2-ring spellcaster. There were 90 terror lizards that were more powerful than the Arctic ice spirit, and more than 400 white hounds that were more powerful than the ice spirit. Compared to the elite human army that had undergone strict training and followed orders strictly, they could not form good cooperation, but they were still a force that could cause a lot of trouble for the enemy. After a while, the ogres of the Shattered Bone tribe marched into the ice cliff territory with heavy steps, carrying their menacing weapons and gathering with their other kin. At the same time, as if it felt the heavy atmosphere, the ferocious frost tiger slowly walked out of its lair and roared towards the sky. It then walked to Garen's side, a bloodthirsty and ruthless light jumping in its tiger eyes. Upon seeing this, Garen stroked the ferocious frost tiger's head and said in a low voice, "There's no rush. There will be a time when I need you." The brutal frost tiger's desire to kill was very high. It often went out to hunt, returning with injuries and gains. Its personality was extremely violent compared to Garen's other followers. It only showed signs of closeness to Garen, and Garen's other followers still didn't dare to approach the ferocious frost tiger. When all his followers had gathered, Garen did not lead them directly out of the ice cliff territory, but returned to the dragon's nest. In his mind, the terrain of the extreme north's ice field that he knew appeared, and then, through the deduction of the army's trajectory, he selected a suitable ambush location one by one. As the human army was moving at slower pace, he had plenty of time. The human army had no idea that they had been targeted by a dragon. Compared to the head-on confrontation between two armies, dragons preferred surprise attacks, especially the white dragon. The white dragons were all masters of hunting. They were the most skilled ice field hunters, able to find a most suitable ambush spot in the complex terrain, and Garen was no exception. He stretched out his dragon claw, and as he thought, he subconsciously drew a simple map on the ice ground. Ice valleys, snow mountains, water lakes. 10 minutes later, Garen's eyes moved slightly, and his sharp claws drew a circle somewhere on the mini-map. It was a steep snow mountain nearly 1,000 meters high. At the same time, a familiar dragon's might charged over, causing the ferocious frost tiger to roar in dissatisfaction. "Luna, I don't know if I can get her to help me if I come at this time." Garen turned his head and looked outside the dragon's nest. She was looking up at Garen. She stretched out her fair palm and held a red, jade-like stone in her palm. The stone's outline was like that of a coiled dragon. The fine dragon scales and sharp dragon horns were clearly visible. It was lifelike and exuded a strong aura of a true dragon. It was the dragon's soul stone. On the dragon's soul stone, Garen felt a strong attraction from the dragon's instinct. Even if he did not know the effect of the dragon's soul stone, he could still confirm that it was a precious treasure through this instinctive attraction. He stared at the dragon's soul stone and had the urge to immediately snatch it and eat it. Luna saw that Garen's attention was drawn to her. She shook the dragon's soul stone and looked up at the same time, saying in a sweet voice, "What's your decision? Give me Morton's notes, and this dragon's soul stone is yours." She did not seem to be on her guard at all, and was not worried that Garen would take the initiative to snatch it. This was the confidence of an adult silver dragon. Garen retracted his gaze from the dragon's soul stone, then took out the 16 notebooks and stacked them in the palm of his dragon claw. But he didn't give a notebook to Luna directly. After thinking for a while, Garen muttered, "Luna, you promised to help me once in addition to the dragon's soul stone. Do you still keep your promise?" Luna nodded without hesitation. "Of course, I'll fulfill all my promises." As if she had guessed that Garen needed her for something, Luna added, "But like I said last time, I won't do anything like bullying the weak. I will only agree to what I think is good and just." Garen didn't say anything and handed the 16 notebooks to Luna. Luna also handed the dragon's soul stone to Garen. After picking up the dragon's soul stone, Garen's heart was filled with the desire to eat it in one bite. Every cell in his body was conveying the desire. But now is not the time. Sleep evolution always took a long time. Using the dragon soul stone would definitely make the sleep last longer. The human army was right in front of him and would come in a few days. He needed to deal with these enemies before using the dragon soul stone. So, do you need my help now? Luna was in a much better mood after receiving Moulton's notes, and she asked in a joyful tone. Yes, Garen did not deny it. If he had the help of an adult silver dragon, he wouldn't have to be so cautious. He could have just charged forward with Luna. The combined attack of the two dragons would have been enough to easily defeat the 2,000-man human army. Luna's lips curled up slightly as she asked curiously, "What is it?" "I'll make a decision after hearing it." Garen considered his words and said, "An army from a human dukedom has already crossed Dragon's Pine Ridge and entered the icy plains of the extreme north." A human army? Luna was slightly taken aback. Garen's voice was low as he continued. "They belong to the Mo Xia Duchy. You should be able to guess why they are here." Luna furrowed her brows and fell silent. The kingdom of Masha destroyed the kingdom of Morton, and they didn't want to let it go. They didn't even want to let the two children go. They chased them all the way to the icy plains of the extreme north. Dealing with such an evil kingdom doesn't go against your principles. Garen waited for Luna's reaction after he finished speaking. The kind and upright silver dragon looked troubled. After hesitating for a few seconds, it shook its head and said, "I'm sorry, Garen, I can't agree to that." After a pause, she said to Garen, "Humans are very complicated. The same goes for the wars between them. I've never interfered in the wars between human countries. No matter which side I help, it's definitely not the right thing to do." Unlike the chromatic dragons, who were driven by profit and liked to participate in human wars to make a bit of money, as a powerful silver dragon, she felt that no matter which side she sided with, it would be a great bully to the other side. Luna rejected Garen, but he was not disappointed because he had already expected it. The metal dragons had always adhered to their own principles, and it was difficult to change their minds once they decided on something. Garen didn't try to persuade her any further. Instead, he asked, "I understand what you're thinking, but if this army comes to you and asks you to hand over Moulton's descendants, what will you do?" Luna chuckled and said, "If anyone dares to challenge the dignity of the silver dragon, I don't mind letting them taste a painful price." Her voice was filled with confidence. No human would want to mess with a metal dragon. If they found out that Morden's friend was actually an adult silver dragon, they wouldn't attack Luna unless they were crazy and wanted to die. Not to mention whether they were a match for an adult silver dragon and her many followers. The revenge of the metal dragon was enough to easily destroy a country. Don't underestimate the combat power of humans. There will always be young dragons who die at the hands of humans because of their arrogance. If you're determined to fight against the human army, you can go find other dragons for help. It's not something to be embarrassed about. Luna didn't stay for long. She gave Garen a suggestion and left. In the ice cliff dragon's nest, Garen was deep in thought. Other dragons? He did not need too many of them. As long as he had the help of an adult true dragon, no matter what species it was, Garen was confident that he could keep the human army in the icy plains of the extreme north forever, and it would not take too much effort. In order to be safe, he seriously considered Luna's suggestion. Crystal dragons, white dragons. The crystal dragon might not be willing to get involved, but the white dragon. Garen was well aware of the nature of ordinary white dragons. As long as there were benefits to be gained, they would do anything without any bottom line. There are 3 white dragons I know of now. The one I'm most familiar with is the White Dragon Lady, and 2 other white dragons. Don't know. Garen already had an idea in his mind. Compared to the 2 completely unfamiliar white dragons, Garen was more willing to talk to the White Dragon Lady. Also, with the mark of time, he could easily find the White Dragon Lady. Although the White Dragon Maiden had been robbed by him once and was hostile, as long as Garen promised to give her the corresponding spoils of war, she would definitely go with joy. Garen understood the White Dragon Lady too well. She was lazy and really wanted treasures, and she was also very vain. Now that a human army had finally appeared, if she knew about it, she would choose to temporarily put aside the past and agree to cooperate with Garen. Closing his eyes, Garen tried to sense the location of the time mark. about 400 miles northeast of the ice cliff dragon nest. With his movement speed, this distance was not considered far. It was enough for him to make a trip back before the human army arrived at his ideal ambush spot. He might even have a lot of spare time. I wonder if the White Dragon Maiden has saved up another small treasure vault. Garen shook his head and gave up on the White Dragon Lady. His resentment towards the White Dragon Maiden had basically dissipated. If he hadn't been coldly and menacingly chased out, he wouldn't have resorted to such violent means even if he wanted the White Dragon Maiden's treasures. Before he left, Garen explained the details of the ambush to Roy Glacier and Wooga Shattered Bones, asking them to bring their followers and move towards the ambush site. Compared to the heavily armored human army that had just entered the icy plains of the extreme north, these creatures that lived there moved very quickly and were very good at hiding and disguising, especially the ferocious frost tiger. This 10-meter-long ferocious tiger had an imposing aura. It was heavy, but when it moved, it didn't make a single sound. Its stealth ability was extremely superb. 1,000 meters high in the sky, the cold wind cut Garen's scales like a knife. Other than making him feel excited, it had no other effect. He lowered his head and looked down at the scenery below. His eyes scanned the area like a radar, gradually filling his mind with a three-dimensional map of the Arctic tundra and noting down the gathering places of some powerful creatures. For example, a pack of winter wolves. The winter wolf's appearance was not much different from an ordinary snow white wolf. It was larger in size, but it was less than 3 meters long. From afar, they looked like a group of ordinary magical creatures that posed no threat. However, if someone really underestimated them, they would have to pay an extremely tragic price, and the price would most likely be their lives. The winter wolf was a highly intelligent magical creature. It could speak the common language in Jotun. It was cunning, smart, powerful, and united. They were even called the Lord of the Icefield because they were more dangerous than white dragons or frost giants. They were the most dangerous wolf tribe in the ice plains of the extreme north. They could use icy breath similar to the frost dragon breath and many spell-like abilities. If they have this pack of winter wolves as their kin, then the human army is just here to die. Garen had his eyes on this pack of winter wolves. However, this kind of highly intelligent wolf was very difficult to subdue. The proud and aloof winter wolf did not think that dragons were nobler than itself. He decided to give it a try when he had the chance in the future. Now is not the right time. Along the way to the northeast, Garen saw many groups of intelligent creatures, magic creatures, subhuman races, and humanoid tribes. Other than the winter wolves, there were also Tauren and trolls that were no weaker than ogres, as well as a 1,000-man tribe of the Icefield barbarians. The Icefield creatures in this direction were generally stronger than the ones that Garen had encountered before. If all of them could be combined, it would be enough to build an unparalleled city belonging to the creatures of the icy plains. Not long after, Garen arrived at the White Dragon Lady's new territory. He could feel the familiar faint aura of a true dragon at the edge. They were in a group of rugged and steep snowy mountains. At a glance, all they could see were snow-capped mountains. They could also vaguely see some nests of ice-field creatures. The White Dragon Lady's new dragon nest was located in one of these mountains, which was neither high nor low. The location of the time mark did not move, so Garen could guess that the White Dragon Lady was sleeping in the dragon nest. His little treasure vault was gone, yet he was still in the mood to sleep. Garen grinned, his platinum dragon eyes looking in the direction of the dragon's nest. In the next second, Garen's draconic aura swept over like a tide and quickly reached his destination. On the edge of one of the mountains, the White Dragon Maiden was sleeping in a simple cave. Her face changed from time to time, and she gritted her teeth as if she was having a bad nightmare. Garen's younger brother and sister dragon were just beside him. They did not know what kind of conflict they had, but the 3 little dragons were wrestling with each other, their claws and fangs rudely greeting each other. At the same time, the dragons might swept across the younger dragon brother and sister dragon like a gale. Their movements stopped at the same time, and their bodies stiffened. They shivered unconsciously and the fear of being dominated by their elder brother appeared in their minds. "Garen's here again." Tom's eyelids drooped. The white dragon maiden's mood worsened after she moved with them. She even felt like giving up on herself. She didn't drive away the powerful creatures in her territory, nor did she try to keep her followers. Other than occasionally giving some food to the dragon whelps so that they wouldn't starve to death, she was almost always sleeping. Due to the traces of frost giant activity not far away, the little dragons did not dare to go out hunting often. Their days became worse, and they would starve from time to time. In the next second, the dragon might swept past the white dragon lady. Her body trembled, but she didn't wake up. However, a few seconds later, she seemed to have suddenly remembered something. Her eyes opened, and she sat up. She looked out of the cave with anger and fear. "You just took my territory, and now you want to take it again? Garen, don't think that I'm afraid of you." The white dragon maiden spoke in the dragon language. On the other side, Garen heard the white dragon lady's words and knew that she was afraid of him. He couldn't help but feel a little happy. He flapped his dragon wings and landed. He found the white dragon lady's new dragon nest through the mark of time. Compared to the comfortable dragon's nest on the 500-meter ice cliff, her new home was much more simple and crude. The edges were pockmarked, and the view was blocked by the higher snow mountains. The ground and walls inside were not polished, so they were uneven and rough. "I seem a little pitiful." Garen walked into the dragon's nest without any hesitation and looked around, sizing it up with a strange gaze. At the same time, he also saw the white dragon lady and his dragon brothers and sisters, whom he hadn't seen in a while. The white dragon lady, who had a slender figure and a slightly graceful figure, looked a little angry now. She panted heavily and stared at Garen without blinking. Her eyes were full of hostility, but there was also a hint of a tough look on the outside, but a weak heart on the inside. "Don't worry, I like the ice cliff dragon's nest very much. I'm not interested in your little cave." Garen ignored the hostility in the white dragon maiden's eyes and spoke in a more casual manner. After hearing Garen's words, the white dragon maiden became even angrier. She felt that Garen had come here on purpose to humiliate and ridicule her. "If you're not interested, then hurry up and leave." "Garen, I don't welcome you," the white dragon lady said angrily. At the same time, she moved her body quietly, as if she was trying to block Garen's vision. This was actually not a new dragon nest. When she had just entered the young dragon stage, she had lived here for a period of time. She had only moved out after finding the ice cliff dragon nest. The white dragon maiden had placed a small portion of her treasures here. It wasn't much, but it was the only comfort she had now. However, her abnormal actions attracted Garen's attention. He took a closer look. Through the gaps between the white dragon lady's limbs, he saw a few sparkling gemstones and some rough, raw gemstones in gold. Seeing that Garen had discovered her remaining treasure, the white dragon maiden immediately assumed a battle stance, flashing her sharp claws and fangs. She said in exasperation, "If you dare to covet my treasures again, I'll fight you to the death. These are my last treasures." Garen couldn't help but laugh. He didn't look at the white dragon lady's treasure and said, "Salia, I don't care about these things of yours." The white dragon maiden snorted and exhaled white frost from her nostrils. "What do you want to do here? A human army? These lowly insects. How dare they venture deep into the icy plains of the extreme north?" After the white dragon maiden heard Garen's intentions, she spat out a breath of cold air in disdain. Her words did not hide her contempt for humans at all. Her attitude reminded Garen of what Luna had said not long ago. Many young dragons had died in the hands of humans because of their arrogance. The white dragon maiden was the epitome of this young dragon. She looked down on almost all other creatures except for other dragons. She believed that only true dragons were noble and majestic, and that all other creatures were only worthy of groveling at the feet of dragons. To be precise, it is a human army that can easily kill you, Garen added, and continued under the white dragon lady's suspicious gaze. This human army is basically made up of cavalrymen, and they are extraordinary warriors wearing rune-heavy armor. They are not ordinary humans, as you think. After he patiently explained the true composition of the group, the White Dragon Maiden's arrogant attitude finally subsided a little. "Oomph, you just took my territory and treasures, and now you want me to help you? Garen, with the grudge between us, do you think I'll agree to it? No matter what, Salia, will never fight alongside you." The White Dragon Maiden stared at Garen, her face sneering as if she was mocking Garen for not understanding the situation. Garen wasn't angry. He knew the White Dragon Lady's bad personality. An elite army of 2,000 men, runic heavy armor, magic equipment for spellcasters, and all sorts of treasures that may be carried with them. If we take them down, we'll get a good amount of loot, enough to fill this hole of yours. The White Dragon Queen flapped her dragon wings and stretched her neck subconsciously. She couldn't help but get restless. Her eyes were green, and her face was filled with unconcealable desire. Seeing this, Garen knew that she was already moved, so he changed the topic and said with a slightly regretful tone, "I'm only here to invite you to this banquet on account of our past friendship. Since you're not willing to participate, then just pretend I never came. We'll meet again in the future." After he finished speaking, Garen turned around and left without any hesitation. The White Dragon Maiden seemed to be struggling. In the end, when Garen walked to the edge of her dragon nest and was about to fly away with a flap of her dragon wings, she couldn't help but call out to him, "Wait a minute, I've changed my mind." Garen stopped in his tracks, turned around, and asked in surprise, "Why did you change your mind? Didn't you just say that you wouldn't join hands with me because of our grudges?" "I've decided to work with other white dragons, so I won't trouble you." The White Dragon Maiden raised her head and slammed her dragon claw on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. It was as if she was demonstrating her strength. "I, Salia, am the most powerful white dragon in the northern ice fields. I am willing to help you because of our bloodline relationship. You only need to give me half of the spoils of war." The most powerful white dragon. Garen didn't hurt the White Dragon Lady's poor self-esteem anymore. However, he didn't agree to half of the White Dragon Maiden's request when it came to the distribution of spoils. "It's impossible to give you half. We'll split it according to our abilities. The enemies you kill will be yours." The White Dragon Maiden thought for a moment and agreed. Sure, although she was defeated by Garen, she didn't feel that she was much weaker than him. In fact, she felt that she had lost for no reason. Until now, she still could not figure out how she had been defeated by Garen. "Since you've already decided to participate, then let's not delay any further. Let's go now." Garen flapped his dragon wings and flew out, his body quickly rising. The White Dragon Maiden was excited as she followed Garen and left. As the two dragons flew into the sky one after the other, the three little whelps, who were almost ignored, looked at each other in the nest. They seemed to be in a very complicated mood. In the cold wind, Garen flew in front of the White Dragon Maiden. She looked at Garen's body, which was a few sizes smaller than hers, and showed an indignant expression, because she realized that no matter how hard she tried to fly, her speed could not catch up to Garen's, and she could never surpass his position. In the beginning, the White Dragon Maiden didn't believe it, and thought that Garen wouldn't be able to hold on for long. However, as time passed, Garen's speed didn't show any signs of slowing down, and he was always in front of her. Detestable. The White Dragon Maiden flapped her wings, and her speed increased drastically. However, Garen, who was in front of her, sped up at the same time and continued to maintain a distance of a few body lengths from the White Dragon Maiden. Garen turned around and looked at the White Dragon Lady, who was gritting her teeth and flapping her dragon wings with all her might. He knew what she was thinking. Currently, Garen's maximum speed in the accelerated state was 5 times, and it would consume the power of time when used. However, when he was only using double the speed, the river of time would automatically wrap around him and move forward. Now, there was no longer any consumption. It was like a permanent passive that had been solidified, flying in a straight line at high altitude without any obstacles in the middle. The two dragons moved very quickly. Before Garen and the White Dragon Lady arrived at the ambush location, they met the army of followers that were still on their way. The ferocious frost tiger sensed Garen's gaze at the first moment. It raised its head and looked into the sky. When it noticed the White Dragon Lady beside Garen, It immediately became alert and roared, its voice rumbling. The white dragon maiden looked down and snorted coldly in dissatisfaction. She released her dragon aura. The ferocious frost tiger was affected by the dragon's might, but it quickly broke free and continued to roar. Garen, your kin, doesn't seem to have enough respect for the true dragon. If Garen wasn't there, the white dragon lady would have torn the ferocious frost tiger that provoked her into pieces. Garen said calmly, "It's a berserker. It's not that smart. As my kin, it only needs to respect me. That's enough." The white dragon maiden also had a family. She took them with her when she left the ice cliff territory, and because she had eaten everything on the way to vent her anger, she had not taken in a new family after changing to a new environment. The white dragon maiden and Garen arrived at their destination first, instead of moving forward with the slower followers. Looking at the snow mountain ambush point that Garen had chosen, the white dragon maiden nodded and said in a professional tone, "This place is very suitable for a surprise attack. Garen, it seems like you're quite capable." Garen was at a loss for words. He felt like the white dragon maiden had forgotten how he had beaten her up. For hours later, the army of followers also arrived here. They climbed up the snow mountain and came to Garen's side. At the same time, the ice plains of the extreme north took care of its native creatures, and at this time, it began to snow heavily. At first, it was only a sporadic light snow, but in a short 10 minutes, it turned into a white snow that covered the world. The strong wind whistled and swept up the snow, covering the figures of the two white dragons and their companions. It snowed all year round in the icy plains of the extreme north, which was actually in normal weather. Garen raised his head to look at the sky, but he still secretly praised the heavens for their blessings. He and the white dragon maiden looked at each other and tacitly activated the cloud technique. When it came to setting up an ambush, he and the white dragon maiden had almost the same way of thinking. Two clouds of mist extended out and wrapped around Garen's followers, covering the aura of magic creatures on their bodies. Next, the giant white dragon lay on the snow mountain, blending into the clouds and the wind and snow. Its platinum pupils blinked occasionally. He was born in the slums of a small city under the Duchy of Masha. Since his mother was kidnapped by the Highland barbarians and gave birth to him, he was bullied and bullied. From a young age, he had seen the darkness and evilness of the human heart. That was until he was spotted by the young Duke of Thorn, who happened to pass by. He brought him back to the main city of the Kingdom of Masha and underwent strict training to become a warrior. In order to repay the Duke of Thorn's kindness, Roxia was always the first to charge forward in every battle for his country. He was not afraid of death or pain. He grew into the strongest warrior of the Kingdom of Moria through blood and fire. Steel Helmet, General of Thorns, Demon Wolf. These were the titles others used to address him, some praising and some slandering. Roxia's favorite nickname was the Vicious Masha Wolf, which he got from a war where he slaughtered an army of 10,000 people. His combined power was only below the few high-level wizards in the Masha Duchy. However, he was already the most powerful person in the Masha Duchy, as the kingdom no longer had any high-level wizards. There were originally 3 high-level wizards in the kingdom of Emosia. One of them had died in the war with the Walker Duchy, and that battle had secured the victory for the Masha Duchy. As for the other 2, he was buried in the northern ice field beneath his feet. For Morton to be able to kill 2 high-level wizards, he must have either died together or was on the verge of death. Roxia knew this, but he was not at ease. Rumor had it that Morton had a powerful best friend in his early years. It was very likely that he was an adult silver dragon disguised as a human. After leaving human society, he went to the icy plains of the extreme north. Since Morton had decided to escape to the icy plains of the extreme north, and through a prophecy spell, they confirmed that there was a dragon involved in this matter. The authenticity of the rumors had become very, very high. This 2,000-strong army was the most elite of the warriors of the Emosia Duchy. They had come to kill the dragon. Even though Roxia knew that the enemy was most likely an adult silver dragon, and that the success rate was very low, and that it was very likely that he would die here, he still obeyed the order of the Grand Duke of Thorn and led his army to the ice plains of the extreme north. Even if they were lucky enough to succeed in attacking an adult silver dragon, they would definitely be subject to the metal dragon's crazy revenge if they were exposed. And NBSB. However, the Mo Duchy could not care so much. Because the Masha Duchy was in a precarious state of crisis, there was no room to think about the future. War was a double-edged sword. The battle in the south had lasted for a long time, and the smoke of war had spread far and wide. The participants were not only from Walker Duchy and Masha Duchy. There were also other wolves and tigers. Driven by hunger, they greedily looked at every existence around them. Without a high-level wizard, and having just experienced war losses, the Masha Duchy had turned from a strong opponent to a soft persimmon that everyone wanted to have a bite of. They were in the eye of the storm. The worst thing was that after paying such a painful price, the most valuable spoils of war in the Walker Duchy had not been completely obtained. The treasure mountain was empty, but they could not enter. If they could not get what Morton had taken away, the kingdom of Masha would lose their only bargaining chip. The best-case scenario would be for the country's strength to plummet. The most likely scenario would be that the Duchy of Walker would be completely destroyed in this war, no longer existing, and its people would be homeless. In order to prevent such a terrifying situation from happening, the Mo Duchy had dispatched a group of elites and taken a huge risk to come to the ice plains of the extreme north. They were prepared to give it their all. An adult silver dragon. Roxia looked up at the snow that was getting heavier and heavier, his heart heavy. He was a little uneasy, although they had never seen an adult silver dragon before. The kingdom of Masha had paid a high price to hire a young red dragon in his 70s to help them in the battle. That was how they had won the battle at the high level. Roxia had seen that red dragon before, and its scorching heat and dangerous aura was frightening. The cold wind was bone-piercing, and the feather-like rhombus snowflakes hit Roxia's heavy armor, but they were blocked by the flashing runes. The human army did not slow down in the cold weather and violent blizzard. They advanced with the help of magic equipment and spellcasters. The war in the south was still ongoing. If anyone discovered the weakness and emptiness of the Masha Duchy, and they had not completed their mission to return, the fate of the Masha Duchy would be unimaginable. As time went by, the human army gradually ventured deeper into the icy plains of the extreme north. Dragon's Pine Ridge behind them only became a looming shadow outline, and the white snow filled their vision. Under the metal helmet that only revealed a pair of eyes, Roxia's expression was heavy and he was silent. For some reason, the uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Roxia's experience of hundreds of battles had made him always believe in his own instincts. On the battlefield, which was like a meat grinder, there were many times when one couldn't think and could only believe in their instincts. Because in that instant of thinking, the enemy's weapon might have already pierced through your heart. Could it be that the adult silver dragon has already discovered us? Roxia frowned. No, with the silver dragon's personality, even if it knows why we're here, it won't care too much before we attack it. As the leader of this army and the hope of the kingdom of Masha, Roxia felt great pressure. It was as if there was a heavy burden on his shoulders. After some thought, Roxia found the highest-level spellcaster in the army. He was an experienced 5th Circle intermediate mage. This middle-ranked wizard specialized in the School of Defense and had fought alongside Roxia many times. They had saved each other's lives and were close friends. Copperfield, I feel a little uneasy. You're a spellcaster, and your mind power is stronger than mine. Did you notice anything unusual? Copperfield was wearing a thick dark yellow robe and had a white beard on his face. He looked to be in his 60s, but he was full of energy and his face was ruddy and full of luster. The cold wind that blew around him was blocked by the spell field, unable to touch his body at all. Hearing this, his eyes flashed with rays of light as he looked around. Then he shook his head and said, "No, I didn't." Copperfield's voice paused for a moment, and his expression sank. "But I'm the same as you. I'm feeling uneasy. There seems to be an invisible danger approaching, but we don't know anything." After some thought, Copperfield constructed a spell and emitted a circular magic ripple that enveloped the knights. A faint magic aura covered their bodies. Defensive spells have increased magic resistance and have a certain defensive effect against sudden magic attacks. The effect is not strong, but it has a large range and a long duration. After casting the spell, Copperfield took out a magic crystal from his spatial ring and quickly replenished his mana, maintaining his peak condition. However, the uneasiness in their hearts didn't decrease because of the protective spell. They looked at each other and could see the heaviness in each other's eyes. 3 days had passed by in a hurry. The solemn human army was now passing by a towering snow mountain that was nearly 1,000 meters tall. The wind and snow gathered at the top of the mountain, blocking their vision. The human army maintained an orderly pace. After a brief observation, they continued to move forward and gradually reached the foot of the snow mountain. At this moment, a thunderous roar was heard. It was deafening. The ferocious dragon's might was like a river that burst its banks from the sky. It was like a strong wind passing through, sweeping through the human army in the blink of an eye. The human army immediately became restless. The horses with the bloodline of magic creatures felt their limbs go soft and fell to the ground uncontrollably. Some of them even had dilated pupils and were almost scared to death. Most of the human knights stiffened at the same time and fell heavily into the snow. 2 huge shadows covered the flying snow and appeared above the human army. The shadows that fell shrouded everyone. At the same time, 2 white dragons, one large and one small, were surrounded by hurricanes and blizzards. They swooped down along the slope of the snowy mountain with an aura that could destroy everything. Their open mouths contained a dangerous icy blue light. Beside the 2 white dragons, a large number of magical creatures followed closely, their momentum shocking. There was a 10-meter-long giant tiger that was extremely ferocious and roared. Roxia and Copperfield's expressions changed at the same time, finally understanding the source of their uneasiness. But he was also a little surprised. Because of the 2 white dragons, one of them seemed to be underage. Even if they had an army, it should not cause them such a sense of uneasiness. At most, it would be a little troublesome. Copperfield raised his magic staff. When he noticed the movement, he had already started chanting and had already completed his spell. Dragon-type Spirit Light. Who? A pillar of light shot into the sky, greatly weakening the dragon's might. It seeped into the surrounding space and continued to play its role. The knights and their mounts returned to normal. The well-trained knights reacted quickly and flipped over to sit down. They took down the large shields on their backs and formed a defensive formation. At the same time, they shouted with high morale, "We fight for the glory of Mo-Sia." The heavy iron shields were stacked on top of each other, quickly forming a thick iron wall. The runes on the shield all lit up, and the bright light penetrated through the wind and snow, connecting into one, revealing an indestructible feeling. On the Noah continent, dragons were not common, but they were not rare either. Many countries had been attacked by dragons before, so dealing with dragon attacks was a necessary training for human armies. Seal the Sky. The spellcasters in the army joined hands to construct spells, and an invisible spell force extended out, greatly limiting Garen and the White Dragon Lady's ability to fly. The 2 dragons felt their bodies sink at the same time, and it was difficult for them to maintain flight with their wings. However, a simple sliding dive was still possible. Garen didn't show off too much, maintaining a similar speed to the White Dragon Lady. In just a few seconds, the 2 dragons swooped down and closed in on the human army with a violent aura. The frost dragon breath that had been brewed was ready to be released. In the next second, an icy blue frost dragon breath was spat out from the dragon's mouth. The bone-piercing icy wind mixed with sharp ice crystals pierced through the wind and snow, rapidly approaching the human army's defensive line. At the same time, Copperfield tore open a spell scroll. A transparent glass-like magic aura was attached to the iron shields. Level 4 spell, Group Resistance Energy. In addition to the level 4 spell, it could also weaken the dragon's breath's anti-dragon aura, and at the same time, it could be used on the defense line of the human army. Boom! Two pillar-shaped dragon breaths, one thick and one thin, fell and hit the knight's shield fiercely. Kacha-kacha! The runes shone sharply, and together with the power of the defensive spells, they tried their best to stop the dragon's breath, but the frost still inevitably corroded and covered the area, freezing the dozens of people who were directly facing the frost dragon's breath in lifelike frost ice crystals. In the face of an attack, the human army's reaction to the battle was already a model example, but it was still inevitable that the shield defense line was broken. However, the White Dragon Maiden wasn't very satisfied with this effect. She was a little angry. In her opinion, a single dragon breath of hers should have killed at least 100 people. Lowly human reptile. With an angry roar, the White Dragon Maiden extended her sharp claws and crashed into the human army. Like a white bulldozer, she overturned hundreds of people along the way, leaving deep trenches in the ground. She went deep into the army and began to wreak havoc. Since Garen didn't do anything stupid like the White Dragon Lady, the White Dragon Lady soon tasted the bitter fruit of her recklessness. Deep in the army's formation, it was as if she was stuck in a quagmire. She was attacked by the heavy armored knights in turn. The heavy and sharp swords, enhanced with elemental energy, fell on her body. In the sound of metal clashing, the dragon's scales gradually cracked. Every time she waved her dragon claws and swept her dragon tail, she could send some people flying, but it was difficult to kill them all. Then, more people would pounce on her. These heavy armored knights with protective spells had amazing defense. They trapped the White Dragon Maiden in the army like chains, slowly devouring her life force. Garen's face darkened, and he cursed the White Dragon Lady for being too stupid and impulsive. She still regarded these people as ordinary troops and looked down on them. However, even though the White Dragon Lady was trapped, she was also holding back a large number of heavy armored knights. It wasn't easy to trap an adult true dragon. At this moment, Garen's followers arrived. The brutal Frost Tiger took the lead and charged into the human army through the opening created by the White Dragon Maiden. It slapped away a few heavily armored knights with its huge paws, and every pounce accurately took away a few lives. As long as its breath, which was similar to the Frost Dragon breath, hit, it could easily freeze a person to death. Tall ogres, large crocodile-like dreadnoughts, white hounds with sharp fangs. They followed closely behind and entered in a single file, clashing with the heavy armored knights in close combat. They were like a sharp knife that completely tore apart the defensive formation that the human army had hastily built. The ogres swept through the crowd like tanks, and few knights could deal with them one-on-one. The white hounds swam around and attacked the knights' mounts, their sharp fangs easily biting off their limbs. The terror lizard was like a heavily armored crocodile. It spat fire from its mouth, burning the knights into torches. At the back, the ice spirits of the extreme north cast spell-like abilities and condensed into sharp ice crystals that were like a storm shooting at the human army. The spellcasters in the army were not to be outdone, and they retaliated with a powerful counterattack. Ice crystals, flames, lightning, poison. Attacks of different attributes filled the battlefield. In addition to the dragons and berserk tigers wreaking havoc together, the battle situation became chaotic. And chaos was a good thing for Garen's side. Garen did not crash into the human army's encirclement like the White Dragon Lady. From a certain distance away, he opened his dragon mouth and spat out dragon breath, freezing the heavy armored knights into ice sculptures. He behaved appropriately and observed the enemy's spellcasters in secret. He didn't attract as much attention as the White Dragon Lady did and attract a lot of firepower. She waved her sharp claws around and spewed out dragon breath, which swept across the surroundings with great destructive power. As the leader of the army, Roxia snorted. He abandoned his mount and jumped up, running towards the White Dragon Maiden. In the middle of the attack, an ogre grinned and swung a large hammer at Roxia. Roxia raised the magic sword in his hand and slashed the hammer and the ogre's body in half with lightning speed. Bright blood bloomed on his armor. He quickly closed in on the White Dragon Maiden and slashed down at her head. The white dragon maiden sensed danger and was shocked. She swiped her claw at Roxia, but he blocked it with his magic sword. Her dragon scales shattered and blood flowed out. The white dragon maiden, who was in pain, had a fierce expression on her face. She spat a frosty dragon breath at Roxia at close range. Even Roxia didn't dare to resist the dragon breath of an adult dragon. He turned his body to avoid the frost dragon breath. On the other side, under the protection of a few heavy armored knights, Copperfield was focused on casting spells to increase the defense of the army as a whole. A few spellcasters were constructing all sorts of spells, bombarding Garen and the White Dragon Lady respectively. Because the White Dragon Maiden was bigger and more conspicuous, she attracted more firepower than Garen. With the addition of Roxia, the leader of the knights, they were a little overwhelmed for a while. Garen glanced at the White Dragon Maiden. She was in a sorry state, but she was fine due to her thick skin, so he was relieved. As for himself, compared to the White Dragon Maiden, he had been underestimated. There were not many spells flying towards Garen. Most of the heavy armored knights were held back by their followers and the White Dragon Lady, and not many of them took the initiative to attack Garen. Realizing that he was being looked down upon, Garen smiled. It was a good decision to get the White Dragon Maiden to draw the enemy's attention. Immediately, Garen's expression turned serious as he chanted a spell in a low voice. He had already found his target. It was an old mage in a dark yellow robe. The magic power in his body was quickly injected into the most lethal spell model that Garen had mastered. The magic of the Evocation School had always been known for its powerful destructive power, and among them, fire-type magic was the most famous. As a most classic fire attribute evocation spell, Fireball had countless high-circle variants. Its powerful destructive power and lethality made all enemies and teammates who faced it tremble in fear. The spell model that had already been engraved flashed in his mind. He injected his magic power into it and quickly completed the outline. The surrounding elemental energy became agitated and gathered towards Garen's position. Bright fiery red elemental light glowed on his body, reflecting the white scales. Red and white rotated endlessly, becoming the most eye-catching color on the entire battlefield. The spellcasters in the army noticed the abnormality of the elemental energy. They looked frightened and cast their eyes on the young white dragon that they had not paid much attention to. When they realized what Garen was doing and wanted to use interference spells to stop him, it was already too late. Copperfield's face sank and he shouted, "It's a mid-level spell from the School of Evocation. Everyone, get ready to defend." His expression was solemn, and his staff lit up with a bright light. At the same time, he chanted an incantation to construct a spell. On the other side, Garen had already completed his casting. The spell had been successfully cast. A fist-sized dark red fireball appeared in front of him. It was covered in rough cracks and occasionally expanded, beating like a heart, revealing a dangerous light. Fourth circle evocation spell, exploding fireball. An ordinary third circle fireball looked like a pea-sized fireball, but its destructive power was already extraordinary. This fist-sized fireball contained a dangerous aura that made all the human experts in the army look at it, and their hearts shivered. The White Dragon Lady, who had been besieged and beaten up, was much more relaxed because the most powerful enemy she was facing had now diverted a large amount of attention to guard against Garen's spells. The flame will purify everything. With a thought, Garen's mental strength locked onto Copperfield's position, causing the expression of this old mage, who was over 50 years old, to change slightly. This guy's continuous use of powerful defensive spells had long attracted Garen's attention, and no matter what the situation was, getting rid of the opponent's powerful mage was always the best way to deal with it. The power of time extended to the bursting fireball, and the next second, the bursting fireball suddenly disappeared. A straight line of fire accurately passed through the gaps in the chaotic battlefield, charging towards Copperfield with an aura that seemed to be able to destroy everything. The hot air that was brought up by the line affected some of the heavy armored knights. The heat passed through their armor, making them feel warm all of a sudden. Time seemed to slow down as Copperfield stared at the fireball. His powerful mental strength allowed him to remain calm, and in such a tense situation, he chanted the incantation without a single mistake, casting his spells. When the explosive fireball pierced through the blizzard and was still 10 meters away from him, he finally constructed a defensive spell. It was Erigal's Ruby Barrier, a fourth circle defensive spell. In such a hasty situation, he didn't have enough time to use a fifth circle or sixth circle intermediate spell. Erigal's Ruby Barrier was the best way to deal with fire tribute attacks. The space suddenly folded and overlapped like a mirror, forming a red glass-like physical barrier, blocking the space between the explosive fireball and Copperfield. In the blink of an eye, the explosive fireball hit the Ruby Barrier, and a large number of cracks suddenly appeared in the Ruby Barrier. Crash! The explosive high-temperature air wave exploded, passing through the edge of the red gem barrier that could not be defended against, and one by one, the heavy armored knights were lifted 4 to 5 meters into the air. Within this range, Garen's followers were no exception. They were caught in the high-temperature air wave, and their skin instantly turned red. The reason why the exploding fireball was called the exploding fireball was because it could explode, and it was very explosive. But this was only the beginning. The surging flames followed closely behind, rolling and rolling behind the high-temperature waves, enveloping the entire space within a 50-meter radius. A small sea of fire appeared in the white blizzard. A series of screams rang out, quickly becoming weaker and then completely cut off. There were heavy armored knights, spellcasters, and Garen's followers. A human figure staggered out of the flames. His robe was in tatters, and his exposed skin was covered in burn marks. Copperfield's entire body was in intense pain, his temples throbbing, and his mind was unable to focus due to the severe pain. He used a healing spell scroll and managed to alleviate some of his injuries. The close-range explosion of the explosive fireball destroyed the Ruby Barrier and caused serious damage to him. Fortunately, the explosive fireball's power had been greatly weakened. In addition, the passive activation of the magical instruments on him had blocked the last of its power, so Copperfield did not die on the spot. A young white dragon who can explode fireballs. Damn it! Why is this strange-looking white dragon using a fire-type evocation spell? Goddess of magic above, almost died. The old mage from a school of defense still had a lingering fear, and his charred face was full of fear. At the same time, he and Roxia both realized why they felt so uneasy. They realized that they had made a serious mistake. They had actually underestimated this young white dragon, which made it difficult for them to concentrate and cast a mid-level spell. Garen did not stop after the surprise attack that had severely injured Copperfield. His expression was dark, and his eyes were calm. At this moment, he had constructed another explosive fireball and was charging towards Copperfield's position. Take advantage of his weakness and kill him. Garen's goal was very clear. Copperfield's expression changed, and he used all his strength to cast a low-tier defensive spell in front of him. But he knew that this would not be able to stop the explosive fireball. The power of the fourth circle exploding fireball was even greater than some fifth circle spells. This was the charm of fireball, and also the reason why so many evocation mages were so obsessed with it. A gust of wind blew. The tall leader of the heavy armored knights had abandoned the white dragon lady the moment he realized that Garen's target was Copperfield. He sprinted towards Garen like the wind. Roxia grabbed Copperfield and threw him out of the explosive fireball's attack range when the fireball exploded and the high temperature of the air and flames erupted at the same time. He was engulfed by the flames. Looking at this scene, Garen did not hesitate to quickly cast the accelerated fireball technique. He did not care about the consumption of magic power, and the seemingly harmless little fireballs flew into the sea of fire that the explosive fireballs had turned into. During this period, other spellcasters would attack Garen to help their own powerhouses. However, when the inferior spells landed on Garen's body, no matter what kind they were, they could only leave some scratches on his dragon scales. They could not even create cracks. This was the first time the Time Dragon's all-attribute magic immunity had shown its powerful effect. A small number of mid-level spells were dodged by Garen using extreme acceleration. It looked dangerous, but it was actually light and perfect. Bang bang. The earth trembled in a series of explosions, and the wind and snow twisted and flew into the air due to the high temperature. The world covered in silver was illuminated by the flames and turned red. At the same time, the flames twisted as if a fierce beast was about to escape. Boom! The flames were repelled by the sharp wind created by the magic sword, and they were diverted to two sides, forming a passage. Roxia jumped out of the passage, his body covered in flames. The high-level rune heavy armor that the Duke of Thorn had bestowed upon him was now covered in red marks, and it was emitting white smoke in the cold. The runes carved on it had completely dimmed. Roxia raised his head and pulled off his metal helmet. He then reached out and threw the runic heavy armor, which had lost its defensive effect, on the charred ground. Her cold eyes met Garen's. Roxia held the magic sword slanted as his steel-like muscles burst forth, and he strode towards Garen. This person who had previously made Garen feel threatened and a little fearful, after revealing his true appearance, made Garen slightly stunned. His appearance was a little ugly. He had a fierce face, dark skin, a thick nose, and no hair on his head. He looked like a big villain who was good at bullying men and women, but the indifference and ruthlessness revealed in his eyes were hard to ignore. As he ran towards Garen, Roxia's skin glowed with a blood-red light, and his eyes showed a hint of uncontrollable rage. At the same time, he let out a low growl. After his condition underwent some strange changes, his running speed increased sharply, and his aura also rose a lot. Garen's eyes focused as he recognized Roxia's current state. It had a very famous name, Berserk. By using Berserk creatures, one could obtain huge boost in vitality, strength, speed, reaction, resistance. The price was that it would be difficult to maintain his rationality, and his body would fall into a serious state of weakness after the Berserk ended. His body and appearance don't look like an ordinary human. He seems to be a hybrid of orcs and barbarians. Garen frowned. He shot out a few accelerated fireballs, which were dodged by Roxia's ugly but very practical instinctive dodging method. It only slowed him down a little. Seeing the other party's determination staring at him, Garen decided to fight out with him. A warrior's ability was relatively simple, so it was much easier to deal with them than spellcasters of the same level who had different means. On the other side of the battlefield, without Roxia's restraint, the White Dragon Lady quickly regained her power and began to wreak havoc in the human army. Now that the battlefield had become chaotic with the participation of Garen's subordinates, it was difficult for the heavy-armored knights to form a tight encirclement. The White Dragon Lady began to kill in all directions. As the shame of the true dragons, the White Dragon was still an extremely troublesome existence compared to other creatures. Copperfield, who had been saved by Roxia, was injured quite badly. He began to work with the spellcasters to help the other heavy-armored knights restrain the White Dragon Lady. An adult dragon that no one could deal with was too destructive, and they could not leave it alone. At the same time, before Garen and Roxia could face each other, the ferocious frost tiger saw Roxia charging towards Garen aggressively. It suddenly let out an angry roar and swiftly leaped across the chaotic battlefield, pouncing towards Roxia from the side. The ferocious cat's sudden attack was as fast as lightning, and Roxia was caught off guard and fell to the ground. The ferocious frost tiger's claws pressed down on Roxia, and its fingertips, which were as sharp as steel knives, stretched out, about to cut open Roxia's chest and abdomen. However, Roxia, who was in a berserk state, was not a pushover. A deep roar came from his 2-meter-tall human body. A huge force burst forth, and under the fierce frost tiger's unconvinced roar, it raised its tiger claws inch by inch. Roxia rolled and dodged another tiger's paw. His magic sword glowed with a sharp light as he slashed upwards at the ferocious frost tiger's throat. Buzz! The brutal frost tiger jumped back agilely to avoid the attack. A straight cut appeared on the fur and scales on its neck. The slight pain made it look fierce. If Roxia had the same body size, this strike would have cut off the head of the ferocious frost tiger. Unfortunately, he didn't have it, so it only caused some superficial wounds. The injured, brutal frost tiger did not want to be outdone, and once again took the initiative to attack. Roxia could not ignore the brutal frost tiger, so he could only give up on Garen and fight with it. A man and a tiger started fighting. Garen saw that the savage frost tiger had a strong desire to fight, so he got entangled with Roxia. As he did not want to hurt it by mistake, Garen used accelerated fireball or explosive fireball, coupled with some spell scrolls, to accurately kill the enemy spellcasters, quickly reducing the number of enemy spellcasters. His spells had been accelerated, and most of the enemies could not react in time. After the number of spellcasters in the human army decreased, it was difficult to defend against the overwhelming ice magic abilities of the ice spirits of the extreme north. As a result, the casualties of the heavy armored knights began to increase. Copperfield was so anxious that he didn't care about the pain. Even if his injuries worsened, he still had to cast spells. He had to deal with the White Dragon Lady and the Northern Ice Spirit at the same time. He was in a terrible fix. However, this situation was mainly caused by Garen's injury, and he could only grit his teeth and swallow the bitter fruit that was caused now. The scales of victory were already tipping towards Garen's side. He could also divert his attention to the battle between the ferocious Frost Tiger and Roxia. A berserker and a berserk warrior were engaged in a frenzied battle. Not many people or magical creatures dared to get close to them. Those who got close were torn to pieces or cut into pieces. The magic greatsword sliced through the blizzard and slashed at the ferocious Frost Tiger wave after wave. However, the ferocious Frost Tiger's scales and muscles were cut open by the magic greatsword when it tried to hit the blizzard with its claws, leaving behind wounds so deep that the tiger's bones could be seen. It became even crazier because of its injuries, but its attacks couldn't hit Roxia, who had a strong body technique, and it couldn't withstand the other party's damage. In just 2 minutes, it was covered in wounds and blood, while Roxia didn't have many injuries. If they continued to fight with Roxia, there was the risk of the ferocious Frost Tiger dying. Seeing that his number 1 underling was no match for him, Garen could no longer sit by and do nothing. The dragons might burst forth and swept past Roxia and the ferocious Frost Tiger at the same time. Roxia, who was mentally berserk, was not affected much. He only turned his head around and locked his crazy gaze on Garen again. The brutal Frost Tiger felt the will contained in the Firebird. After roaring at Roxia unwillingly, it jumped away a few times and learned from Garen to kill spellcasters. Although it was not as efficient as Garen, the ferocious Frost Tiger still caused quite a bit of trouble. It was like an assassin, causing the enemy spellcasters to be frightened and have no choice but to divert a large amount of attention to guard against a surprise attack. Although he felt a hint of danger from Roxia, it did not mean that Roxia was an existence that Garen would fear. In other words, anyone whose speed was within his reaction range and who needed to fight in close combat to pose a threat to him was not considered a real enemy by Garen. There was no other reason other than the fact that he could do whatever he wanted with Time Freeze. What Garen was truly afraid of was the kind that was far away from him, and a high-level spell could instantly enter his soul. Once a spell was successfully cast, its attack speed would be faster than Garen's extreme acceleration state. Some spells could even be used on the enemy before they realized it. However, Roxia was obviously not this type. The 1.6-meter-long magic sword had a dark green gem embedded on the hilt. As Roxia waved it, a sharp sword light was emitted from the edge of the sword, making a shrill sound of cutting through the air as it slashed towards Garen. Before he arrived, the wind-attributed sword chi arrived first. Almost at the same time, Garen's body expanded in the wind under the light of a spell. His dragon horns became thicker and more towering, his dragon wings were wide, and his dragon tail was thick and long. In an instant, he transformed into an adult dragon that was similar in size to the White Dragon Maiden, but a few times stronger. Fourth circle, transformation spell, giant. This sudden change in body size attracted Garen's attention, including the White Dragon Lady. The White Dragon Maiden raised her head and looked at Garen in shock. Her expression changed, and no one knew what she was thinking. One of the heavy-armored knights took advantage of her distraction to jump up and hit the white dragon lady's head with his large shield. It made a crisp sound and a string of sparks. The white dragon maiden snapped out of her daze and smacked the man on the ground with her backhand, crushing him and his men. On the other side of the battlefield, Garen felt the power circulating in his body and reached out with his sharp claws. Buzz! The white claw, which was like a metal blade, grabbed the green sword energy tightly. It squeezed hard, and the green sword energy exploded into elemental energy. On the dragon claw, there was a crack, but it didn't bleed. Not only magic resistance, but Garen's physical resistance was also very high, far from what an ordinary true dragon could compare to. After using the giant spell, which consumed a lot of magic power, this resistance was strengthened. However, the sword aura attack could not really hurt Garen. The sword aura was just a test. Roxia, who was suppressing the rage in his eyes, growled in a low voice. He bent his body slightly, and with the wind and snow behind him, he instantly ran in front of Garen. Then he twisted his waist and slashed his magic sword in an arc. His entire body flew up on the spot, using high-speed rotation to increase the cutting power of the blade, trying to cut Garen's dragon scales layer by layer from the bottom to the top. Some of the feather-like snow was caught in it and was instantly crushed into snow slag, giving the light of the sword a matte white. Such a fierce attack was already a technique that belonged to a warrior. However, what Roxia didn't expect was that after he used Berserk, his attack, which was both faster and more powerful, strangely missed. Garen, who was originally a few meters in front of him, suddenly became about 10 meters away from him. It even felt natural that Garen was there. The area of effective time stop was limited. If it was used for a long time, it would be a grotesque area in the eyes of outsiders. Garen did not want to expose his ability in front of so many creatures, so he only used it for a moment. He had no choice but to use it. He did not want to be cut by the magic sword. The injuries on the White Dragon Maiden and the ferocious Frost Tiger were all caused by Roxia. In the eyes of other creatures, it seemed as if there was a pause. Unless they were experienced and knowledgeable enough to realize that it was the existence of a change in time, they would only think that their eyes were playing tricks on them, or that Garen had used some kind of space spell. Compared to time spells, spatial spells were equally rare, but they weren't mysterious. Spatial ring, teleportation portal, magic bag. These all involved spatial power, and even sealing off the sky contained some spatial changes. When Roxia used his skill, his old strength had subsided, but he had yet to generate new strength. While he was still in midair, Garen swung his dragon tail. The dragon's long and slender dragon tail that was covered with dragon scales swept over. The huge force pushed away the flying snow and whipped Roxia's body with a biting cold wind. Boom! Like playing baseball, Roxia's body was sent flying like a ragged doll, knocking over dozens of heavy-armored knights and 4 to 5 ogres. In the end, he only managed to stabilize his body after leaving behind a long ravine 300 meters away. If it had been an ordinary spellcaster, his body would have been turned into minced meat. Garen felt a sharp pain in his tail and looked back. When Roxia was sent flying by him, he reacted quickly and slashed with his sword. The unusually sharp magic sword cut opened the white dragon scales and tore the muscle tissue below. Dragon blood flowed out. If he had not used the giant transformation technique, the wound would have been even bigger. Garen's face darkened. He looked past the chaotic battlefield and saw Roxia, who was getting up. This guy with red skin was breathing heavily, his eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on his forehead were popping out. He didn't look like he was in a good state, but he still had a high fighting spirit. After taking a few deep breaths, he killed all the people in his way with red eyes and ran towards Garen. He seemed to have gone completely berserk. His resistance had increased a lot, and he was not afraid of pain, but his rationality had also almost completely disappeared. This was because other than Garen's followers, there were also a few unlucky heavy-armored knights who happened to be in front of Roxia and were mercilessly killed by him. The other heavy-armored knights seemed to be used to this scene. They immediately dodged and stayed away from the completely berserk Roxia. At the same time, a few spells were shot at Garen. They were mainly fire-type attacks to coordinate with Roxia's actions. The human spellcasters mistakenly thought that Garen was a white dragon that was afraid of fire-type attacks. But those lower-level spells, no matter what elemental attribute they were, Garen was actually too lazy to dodge them. He let them hit his body, bringing him a massage-like feeling. This terrifying magic immunity made all the lower-level spellcasters despair. He looked at the approaching Roxia, who had gone completely crazy. Garen opened his mouth calmly, and an icy blue light rolled between his fangs as he waited quietly for Roxia to approach. Plundering Breath of Time wasn't effective against enemies in their prime like Roxia, but it was a great weapon against the old mage, and no protection was effective. Roxia's speed was very fast and agile, like a gust of wind. A distance of a few hundred meters could be covered in an instant. Even if Garen could use time freeze, he had to be able to keep up with the reaction time, so he needed to be fully focused. A few seconds later, Roxia stepped into Garen's time freeze range. Garen moved his throat and opened his mouth. When she noticed Garen's movements, Roxia was instinctively on alert, planning to avoid the frost dragon breath at any time. Garen used time stop without hesitation. At this moment, the wind and snow stopped. When Roxia was stopped for a moment and time returned to normal, his vision was filled with the icy blue wind and sharp ice crystals that belonged to the frost dragon breath. Who? The column-like condensed dragon breath hit Roxia and drowned his body. Veins popped out on his forehead, and his voice was filled with disbelief. He never thought that Roxia, who was in a berserk state, would be hit by the dragon's breath so easily. He didn't even make a move to dodge. Everything happened so suddenly. As most of his attention was distracted by the ferocious frost tiger's attack, Copperfield did not notice the momentary pause in time and space. After learning from Garen to attack spellcasters, the ferocious frost tiger quickly found Copperfield and wanted to kill him without giving up. This was because ordinary spellcasters would find it difficult to dodge the ferocious pounce of the ferocious frost tiger, and Copperfield, who was not easy to kill, attracted all the attention of the ferocious frost tiger. At the same time, the moment Copperfield revealed an opening, the ferocious frost tiger pounced forward once more. The muscles on its robust body were distinct, and with a leap of 100 meters, it swiped its claws at Copperfield. Copperfield had no choice but to shift his gaze away and focus on dealing with the ferocious frost tiger. An invisible field extended out and wrapped around his body. Highly effective field deflection, very good defense against physical attacks. The brutal frost tiger's claw hit the deflective field, but it was like hitting a slippery loach. The tiger's claw was involuntarily deflected and landed on the ground with a loud bang, smashing a deep pit. At the same time, runes lit up on the ground, and they exploded and bloomed like landmines. The explosive seal was a rare killing spell in the School of Defense. The ferocious frost tiger's defense was not up to par, and its forelimbs were bleeding from Copperfield's counterattack. It growled in pain, and its movements became somewhat sluggish. The surrounding heavy armored knights immediately pointed their swords at each other, but the injured ferocious frost tiger still had a strong jumping ability. It first spewed out a cold wind to force the nearest heavy armored knights away, then leaped dozens of meters away from the heavy encirclement. Beside Copperfield, there were many heavy armored knights who were specially assigned to protect him. However, they did not have a good way to deal with the ferocious frost tigers, who had amazing jumping ability and came and went like the wind. Even Garen was surprised by this guy's jumping and killing ability. As the leader of the army, Roxia would also be pounced on by the ferocious frost tiger if he was not aware. The location where Garen and Roxia were fighting. The frost dragon breath hit Roxia's face. Roxia's movements instantly became stiff as if he was in slow motion. Then he was covered in ice and frost and was frozen into a lifelike ice sculpture. However, he was not dead yet. Garen could feel the heart beating in the ice crystal. The ice crystals on the surface of his body trembled continuously, and one could see that cracks were gradually appearing in the innermost part. This guy's resistance was very high, and it was more difficult to kill it instantly like other creatures. However, by first using the frost dragon breath to deal damage and then sealing his movements, it would be very convenient for Garen's next attack. He was focused, and the spell model in his mind began to flash. The profound incantations that belonged to the School of Curses were spat out word by word, drawing in the magic power, and gradually formed two millstone-sized balls that were still spinning at high speed in front of Garen. One of them was an ice crystal ball that emitted an endless stream of cold air, while the other was a flame ball that was scorching hot. Fourth circle spell, Freezing Pearl. Fourth circle spell, Fire Bead. These two spells were extremely similar, which was why Garen was able to use them almost at the same time. And they were created to be used at the same time. Among all the schools of magic, the spells of the School of Curses had the most abundant effects and the most diverse types. They summoned creatures, conjured energy, healed, created items, and teleported. Some of the spells sounded like the School of Evocation, but they were actually the School of Curses. They did not involve the reconstruction and fine control of energy. Under Garen's control, the cold bead and the fire bead moved to the front and back of Roxia's body, and then slammed into the middle. If the cold bead and the fire bead could hit the enemy at the same time, their power would be extremely amazing, surpassing the spells of the same level in the School of Evocation in one fell swoop. However, it was difficult to hit the enemy because of the slow speed, and the advantages and disadvantages were obvious. When Roxia's pale lips broke through the ice, he felt a cold and hot force close at hand. Crash! The cold bead and the fire bead came into contact, and a violent explosion formed an inverted bowl-shaped energy vortex. The ice and fire elements in it intertwined and surged, and the red and blue colors quickly engulfed the surrounding land and space. The earth trembled and the air evaporated. The entire battlefield paused for a moment because of this astonishing spell. Roxia, who had just been baptized by the dragon's breath and didn't have time to catch his breath, was once again engulfed by the brilliance of the spell. In the end, I'm still not as good as a spellcaster. Garen shook his head, feeling sorry for Roxia. When a human warrior fought with a human mage, unless they could kill the other party with a thunderous momentum and not give the other party a chance to cast a spell, they would fall into a continuous chain of spell attacks. The larger and more complex the battlefield, the more the role of spellcasters could be played. A well-prepared spell and an experienced spellcaster could often turn the tide of the battle. That was the reason for his high status. Roxia's well-tempered body made him look like a human-shaped true dragon, but because he could not cast spells, he could only rely on his physical body. He was a little weak when facing a true dragon who was skilled in both magic and martial arts, especially when Garen could use time stop, an unresolvable time technique. When the red and blue frost heat energy vortex faded, a deep pit with a diameter of dozens of meters had appeared on the ground. Ice crystal spikes and burning flames were everywhere. A half-dead figure was lying at the bottom of the pit, motionless, but the magic sword beside his hand was still bright, attracting Garen's attention. To Garen's regret, Roxia had a space ring on him, but it had been destroyed by the energy vortex. Looking at Roxia, who was still breathing weakly but not completely dead, Garen could not help but praise this person's strong vitality. Even if the White Dragon Lady did not die from this attack, she would lose a layer of skin. To be able to have such a tough human body, she was already a powerful warrior. A normal adult white dragon would not be his match in a one-on-one fight. It would be difficult for Garen to defeat her without using time freeze. Bearing with the much more turbulent magic attacks, Garen approached Roxia, stretched out his dragon claw, and stabbed at his heart. The sharp nails pierced through the enemy's chest, and the weak life force completely disappeared. Garen let out another dragon breath and buried it in the ice forest. Immediately, he raised his head and met the eyes of the old mage, who looked dejected. He could clearly see the flames of anger and helplessness in his eyes. As a fifth circle intermediate wizard, Copperfield had mastered quite a few fifth circle defensive spells. However, due to Garen's rapid damage, he could not cast any of them. The physical and mental state of the spellcaster were also important casting conditions. He was already a very good spellcaster if he could barely use a level 4 spell after being seriously injured. As time passed, the war that took place in the icy plains of the extreme north was nearing its end. 60% of Garen's followers were dead or injured, while more than 80% of the heavy armored knights and spellcasters on the human side were dead or injured. Blood flowed like a river, and a red scroll appeared in the snow-white world. Because of the death of a large number of spellcasters, the spell that sealed the sky had lost its effect. After being freed from the restraints of the sky, the white dragon lady flapped her dragon wings and soared into the air. She laughed proudly and kept using her dragon breath to wash the ground. From time to time, she would dive down and crush some people to death. I've been posting a comment on my friend circle, saying that I'm a new author and asking for support. This is actually a lie. I've been writing books for 6 years. I've opened many outs on Qidian and written many books. I've tried all kinds of books. However, in the end, he still decided to go all the way from the starting point, because the first starting point he came into contact with had become used to the style of the starting point and had become the shape of the starting point. 6 years was a very long time. I wrote my first book in my first year of university. Fortunately, I signed the contract, but unfortunately, my results were very poor. I concentrated on writing for a few hours every day, and my thumb hurt from writing on my phone. I only got a few hundred yuan a month for full attendance. However, just a few hundred yuan for full attendance was enough to make me ecstatic. While my roommates were playing games or chatting, I was writing for the hundreds of yuan full-time staff. I actually wanted to join them and enjoy my happy college days, but the conditions didn't allow me to. The college tuition fee is 3,600 a year. It's cheap for many people, but for my family, it's a sum of money that we have to scrape together. For the first time in 18 years, I went out for a meal with my roommates. That was the first time I had a meal at a restaurant. Later on, he went out to work during the holidays and became a tutor in between. He could earn more money, but he did not stop writing. With more income, he could reduce some of his family's foreign debt burden. After writing for a long time, even an ordinary person like me, who has no talent, has gradually figured out the way and mastered some techniques. The results of the book had improved slightly. In his 4th year as a writer, he wrote his first book by Qianjun. Finally, he didn't have to rely on his hard work to eat. He felt a little light when he walked. Although Qianjun's results were still not good, I couldn't be more satisfied. It was a pity that the new book released after that book was finished still had poor results. However, I was already used to it, so I easily accepted this result. This was the first time in his 6 years of writing that he had finished all the recommended draconic novels in the new issue. The editor said that he had the chance to write a masterpiece. It's top quality, and it's 3,000 per square meter. Some of the great gods feel that it's already a dream for low-ranking authors like me to get results like this. It's hard for me to imagine that I'll be so close to fine grade one day. In the comments section, many readers said that the dragon novel would definitely be incomplete and that it would not be long. However, I want to say, please give me more confidence. This is the best book in the past 6 years, and I will try my best to write it well. Once again, I would like to thank all my readers for following up on my reading, voting, and giving me gifts. I will remember everything. I'm touched by your trust. I hope everyone can support the original version. I really need your support so that when my relatives ask me what I'm doing, I don't have to stammer and be unable to speak. After it's uploaded, it usually ends at 6,000 words per 3 chapters, but I'll try to upload as much as possible. There are close to 40,000 bookmarks, and the editor said that he had more than 3,000 follow-up reads. The initial subscriptions were generally lower than the follow-up subscriptions. If the initial subscriptions could reach 3,000, I promised to at least 10,000 a day a month. My typing speed was not fast, and this was already the limit of my limit. As for adding more chapters, since it's already quite difficult for me to maintain the promised updates, I don't really want to promise to add more chapters, so I'll set the requirements higher. The Alliance Master would add 5 chapters at a time, and every 1,000 monthly votes would add 5 chapters. I don't want to add more and more. Finally, if you'd like to ask for subscriptions and monthly votes, Hope that everyone can support the original version on Chidian Chinese Network. Please, I really need it. Some people began to flee, no longer fighting to the death. Garen did not care about the scattered people who were running away. His followers had already caught up with them. In the vast northern ice field, it was very difficult for humans who were not used to this environment to escape the pursuit of the ice field creatures. At this time, he looked at the last human who was still resisting. Copperfield, as well as a few heavy armored knights and spellcasters who had gathered around him. They were trapped in a tight encirclement, and their numbers were constantly decreasing. However, under Copperfield's defensive spells, they would not all die in a short period of time. Garen kept Roxy his weapon, that rather remarkable magic sword that could easily cut through dragon scales. Then, he flapped his dragon wings, and his body quickly rose into the air, repelling the wind and snow as he flew towards Copperfield's position. The silly white dragon maiden was cruelly toying with her enemies who were alone. She picked them up in the air and threw them to their deaths. She never got tired of it. Garen didn't have such bad preferences. However, he didn't stop the white dragon maiden either. She could do whatever she wanted. That was her nature. If she was smart enough, she would have attacked Copperfield first and killed him. Then, she would naturally be able to take away the spoils of war from a mid-ranked wizard. The White Dragon Lady was closer to Copperfield, and if she had realized this, she would have been able to beat Garen to it. On the other side, when the old wizard saw Garen flying towards him, his face showed a touch of unwillingness and despair. If not for the fact that he had been severely injured by the explosive fireball at the start, he would have been more useful in this battle. However, now that things had come to this, there was no way to make up for it. Copperfield gritted his teeth and endured his remorseful emotions and the pain in his body. His face was pale as he chanted an incantation. Soon, the elemental energy gathered and turned into a few chains with a metallic texture. They quickly wrapped around Garen's four limbs while the other end was rooted deep into the ground. Fourth circle defensive spell, Ground Binding Chain. This spell's attack speed was extremely fast, and even with Garen's speed and reaction, he could not dodge it in time. After his limbs were bound by the steel chains, a pulling force could be felt, restricting Garen's movements. At the same time, Copperfield tore open a spell scroll, and a shockwave pushed away the surrounding troops. He then roared, "Run!" The surrounding people did not hesitate. Taking advantage of the gap between the subordinate troops being shaken down, they quickly scattered in all directions, each using their own means to distance themselves from the battlefield. Garen shook his head and pulled with his dragon claws. It's a last-ditch struggle. Crack! The teeth-numbing sound of metal twisting rang out, and the chains wrapped around his body gradually stretched and broke, then turned into elemental energy and disappeared in the snow. "Tell me, why have you come?" Garen spoke in the common language, his voice low. Hearing the giant white dragon speak, Copperfield was slightly taken aback before sneering, "You want to know? Go to hell and ask Tiamat. Despicable and shameless evil dragon. Sooner or later, you will completely disappear from the Noah continent." A few explosive magic seals shot out from Copperfield's body and flew towards Garen, but they were immediately destroyed by Garen's sharp claws. There were no signs of injury on his dragon claws, and his defense was much higher than that of the ferocious frost tiger. Garen's expression did not change, and he stopped talking nonsense with the other party. He opened his dragon mouth slightly, revealing crisscrossing, sharp dragon teeth, and lowered his head to aim at Copperfield. There was no icy blue dragon breath light brewing inside, but Copperfield's instinctive reaction made him feel extreme danger. He knew that the danger came from Garen, but he did not know what it was. Dragon breath. Copperfield looked around at the malevolent white dragon, the brutal ogres, and the beast-like violent tiger. He took a deep breath and constructed a spell with a numb expression. Solidified blue spiritual light appeared and wrapped around his body, as if sealing Copperfield in a blue transparent crystal. The blue crystal spiritual light was a spell used to defend against the white dragon's breath. Immediately after that, An invisible, intangible, an invisible breath of time plundering was spat out from Garen's mouth. Along the way, the snowflakes that were touched by the breath of plundering time instantly melted, as if they had never existed, so much so that a hollow passage was formed in the air. Such a visual scene caused Copperfield's expression to change, and his heart began to palpitate. In an instant, the breath of plundering time drowned Copperfield, who had cast a defensive spell. The blue crystal spiritual light around his body did not play its role, as it was directly penetrated by the invisible breath of plundering time. Dense wrinkles bloomed on Copperfield's face, and his originally lustrous skin seemed to have gone through a long period of time. It quickly dimmed and sagged, and his hair turned white in an instant. Copperfield, who discovered the changes in his body, had a look of fear on his face. But soon, he was so frightened that he couldn't even react. The loss of magic power, the decline of physical functions, and the confusion of consciousness. After a few seconds, the light of wisdom belonging to a spellcaster in his eyes had already dimmed and dissipated. The effect of the plundering breath of time was destined to be an extremely high threat to older creatures. It was less harmful to long-lived creatures like dragons and elves. Due to the melting of mana within the breath of plundering time, Copperfield's withered and aged body lost the protection of mana and was exposed to the blizzard. A bone-piercing cold wind blew in his face, and with just a violent blow, it scattered his already dying breath of life. Bang! The old body fell into the snow without a sound, like a piece of withered wood. Garen retracted his gaze and took off the undamaged magic tools from Copperfield's body. After a simple glance, he kept them away. Immediately, he looked at the other humans who were running away. Garen's followers were chasing after these people, rapidly reducing their numbers. At the same time, the White Dragon Maiden was tired of playing the embarrassing game in the air. She flew to Garen's side and looked at his uninjured body. She snorted, "Garen, I want to change the distribution of the spoils." Garen turned to look at the White Dragon Lady. Compared to Garen, the White Dragon Lady's body was covered in wounds. Her dragon scales were broken in many places, and there were dried blood stains on the side. She looked a little disheveled. These injuries were mainly caused by her attracting too much firepower at the start and the other party's concentrated attacks. After Roxia went to find Garen, she suffered very few injuries. "What do you want to change?" Garen asked. The White Dragon Maiden tilted her head and thought for a moment. Then she pointed at the many wounds on her body and said, "Look at me, and then look at you." After a pause, she pretended to be pitiful and threatened. "I've suffered such a serious injury and almost died. If you don't give me enough spoils of war, then I'll—" "You'll do what?" Garen narrowed his eyes.